Call the meeting of the Municipal Building Review Task Force, 6:45 p.m.
All right, Smithfield Town Council joint meeting with the MBRTF, February 15th. And can we have a prayer and a pledge, please?
Thank you for bringing us together today in the spirit of generosity. May we honor one another by keeping an open mind. May we voice our truth and listen with an open heart. May we discern your will to unite in fruitful outcomes. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Here.
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 Yeah. And for the task force, Paul Vadney,
Here.
Terry Barnamoli,
Here.
David Chamberlain is absent. If you don't mind, I'll just do it. Approval of our minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So you have in front of you the minutes from January 19th, 2023. If you've read them, do we have a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes from January 19th, 2023.
And let the record show David Chamberlain's here. Do we have a second?
Second.
Paul Vadney. Any questions, comments, corrections? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Okay, so tonight we're going to start with new business, and just let everyone know, we'll take a motion after the presentation to open up for any comment or discussion after the presentation. So we'll start with new business. A, discussion by council vote or other action regarding updated presentation for the construction of a new police station from Tecton Architects.
So I'll do just a very brief intro, because I don't think my voice is going to last. We have Jeff McElravy and Rebecca Hopkins from Tecton Architects out of Hartford. And they're going to go through the presentation in a lot more detail than I've done over the past, I think the last time I did it might have been as long ago as August. So this is the latest information that they have. So Jeff?
Evening. Stand the right distance from this microphone so I don't get the feedback here. Maybe it's further back. Just really quickly, I'd like to obviously go through this presentation and get a little bit of a preview of what we're going to... I'm good. A little bit of a preview of what we've got coming. Rebecca? There we go. So we're going to go through a little bit of a summary of the process that we've been through. It's been a little over 2 years now. And then we're going to talk about sort of a recap of the program, take a look at the proposed conceptual designs, and then, of course, where our opinion of probable cost stands, a little bit of a discussion of procurement options, and then we've got a little bit of schedule to take a look at what possible future steps could be taken if the community opted to proceed with the project. So, first slide. Again, it's going back a couple years now, but we did a thorough evaluation of the deficiencies throughout the building and grounds, including compliance with current public safety standards. So we took a real hard look at the condition of the existing building and the capacity of the site, the condition of the site. We learned about all the easements with the tower on the site so that we could have a real understanding of what we were working with. Then we established the projected space needs for the department. And I want to be careful. We've talked about this as a program. That's architectural language for a list of all of the things that go into a building. There was, I think, a misinterpretation one time that it was some computer program. It is not actually a computer program. It is derived from conversation with the users of the police department to understand what their needs, their current needs are, where their current challenges are, and then to talk about where the future might lead us. And when you're investing in a building like this, you want to make sure that you're getting real lifespan out of it. So, we always talk about looking programmatically for 20 to 50 years into the future. That doesn't mean the building is only going to last 50 years. The old building's been there a long time, and new construction to a commercial standard can be there for a very long time also. But it is a little bit hazy on your crystal ball to look too far into the future. So we can understand where the community is now, where their department is now, and then make some projections towards the future in terms of giving some potential future growth of staffing and changes of service. And we've seen a lot of that. I'm a member of the International Association of Chiefs of Police, and every meeting I go to, we talk about the changes that are happening in policing, particularly across our country, but also around the world. So the projected space needs is really about a dialogue with the department to understand the kinds of spaces they need to do the job that they're doing. We also dug a little bit deep into an evaluation of the suitability of the current site for a new police facility. Basically, we do this through a series of site test fits. Basically, we take the program, which is that list of space needs, and we try a couple ideas about how we might fit something on that site. And we do several of these, and we do them fairly quickly to help make sure that we explore all the possibilities. It's really easy to draw one and go, oh, look, it doesn't work. But you got to look at it a little bit differently and try it a different way and see what fits. And so as a new construction options on the existing site, but addition renovation options on the existing site. And one of the big pieces that comes into play there is with your existing building, you've got a lot of different levels going on. And in these days when we have to comply with ADA requirements and handicap accessibility issues, all of those levels are really challenging. And they can create some real disjoints in the programmatic relationships between spaces. From those test fits, we look at and determine what test fits are the most promising, and then we develop them into conceptual designs. Now, when you start laying out the floor plans and really building the conceptual design, you learn a lot more about the way the spaces interact, and that helps us make some decisions about what might really work. And out of the test fits, out of the conceptual design, what we learned is that those multiple layers that I talked about were really challenging for adding on space. What we found is, we had to work with existing grade to make sure that we had appropriate prisoner entry points vis-a-vis a sally port, and then an on-grade entry into the prisoner area, and then transition either down or up into other areas of the existing building. And then also creating a public entry that was handicap accessible. Right now you walk in the front door and immediately have to go up a stair. So we wanted to get an accessible front entry, which meant bringing the dispatch center down to on grade so that you could have immediate police service as you come in that public entry. And so that created some challenges, particularly from the police department's operational standpoint. They didn't like all of those half-level changes to get throughout the building. Things that should have been right next door to one another were a half level away. But more importantly, what that resulted in is we spent a lot of square footage in circulation space. So because we have to deal with either elevators or ramps, and because the half levels happen at the front and the back of the site, resolving those took up additional square footage. The new construction option, we were able to design a building that had an on-grade entry with some of the key programmatic elements right on grade. The big challenge there was we are on an existing site and there is phased operations. The new construction will utilize a significant portion of the available site, so we would have to temporarily relocate at least parking off-site during the construction period. So there are some challenges with both options, but at the end of the day, the committee determined, with input from the police department, that they preferred the new construction option over the addition renovation option. So we sent both of those options out to our cost estimator to get an initial estimate of costs, and they came back with two numbers, and really at the end of the day, the numbers were pretty close, but it really did justify the new construction option. We also did an evaluation of you're still a little ahead of me here. We also did an evaluation of operating and maintenance costs on that, taking a look at what the operating costs of each solution would be. And down over here, you can see that the addition renovation came in at about $85,000 a year, and then the new construction was about $52,000. And again, that's because we have control over the new construction envelope, and better insulation, better envelope reduces energy costs. Plus, we have also control over all the finishes so that we can get more durable and easily maintained finishes through that solution. So that was the original step of the study that we engaged in. And, you know, it was the recommendation of the task force to construct a new facility on the existing site, which allowed the existing structure to remain in use until the new structure was built, and then relocate into it. That saves on the potential cost of temporary facilities. In other words, you don't have to house them somewhere if you tear down the building and then build new in the same spot. So that was the end result, and in the town council, we presented it to the town council in September of 2021, and we were asked, the task force was asked to explore doing some value engineering, some square footage savings from that standpoint. So that brings us up to where we are, or where we were as of September 2021. From the programmatic standpoint, we sat back down with the police department, and Chief Lafferty at that time had done some tours of other new police facilities, and he'd learned a lot from that. And so we engaged in a dialogue of opportunities of reducing square footages. And so we had originally had a space needs of 21,688 square feet. After going through that exercise with his newfound knowledge from his site visits, we were able to bring the main facility square footage down to 16,725 square feet. A big piece of that was reducing vehicle bays, but also looking at various other elements throughout the program. The one thing we did add is about 1,242 square feet of an outbuilding. Because a police building is an essential services facility, it is designed to withstand the worst of elements. When bad things happen to your community, the police station needs to stay functioning. Other buildings that fit that category are hospitals and fire stations. So it's designed to a higher standard. By using an outbuilding, you can put some of that non-essential support space in a building of lesser construction costs, because you know where you're operating out of, where your communications are out of, where your police are responding out of, that needs to meet the essential services facility. But a storage garage storing vehicles or doing vehicle processing doesn't have to meet that same standard because it's not the response facility. So you can build that at a lesser cost. So we ended up, again, 16,725 square feet of main headquarters with a 1,242 square foot outbuilding. We then went back to the conceptual design phase to take a look at the possibilities here. I'm going to see if I can do this with the mic here, but okay, here we go. All right. So down in the lower left is the location that we proposed for the new police headquarters. The existing station is that gray shaded area with the dashed line around it. So you can see we're building back behind and to the left of the existing station. We got about, 20, 25 feet separation in there, so we're going to be close into that building during operations. But you can see all of the cruiser and staff parking are in this back area, so we will have to relocate that. We've been talking about some options for that off-site so that the police have places to park and park their personal vehicles. The outbuilding that I talked about sits way up there. Rebecca's got it. I do want to point out there is there's a tower on site that has a right-of-way that has to remain, as well as its support shed. But the idea here is that now we create a new public parking lot out front, and then we have an access gate that allows us into the secure areas where we have police parking and staff parking, and then an impound lot all around the back corner. So we get everything on the site. We have 2 ways in and out of the site, which is something that we look for in new police facility design. One is, of course, that main entry off of Smithfield Road, and then through that public lot, we've got a second way out. You've also got a third option coming out of the Sallyport further down the road. So we've got a couple different ways off of that site. Of course, during construction, the front of the building will be partly occluded by the existing building, but after the demolition and the completion of the parking lot, you should have a pretty good street presence so the community can clearly identify where to go when they're seeking support from the police department, and should have a clearly identifiable entrance. That's something we think about a lot, because when the public interfaces with the department, if they're going there for help or they're going there for records, it's police stations can be a little intimidating. I go to them all the time. I'm not so intimidated, but other people can be. And so we try to think about the citizens' response to their approach to the building and how they interact with it, and make sure that when they come in the public lobby, they find the services they need in an easy way, and that it's clear, and we want to simplify that interaction with the police department. So on to the floor plan. So our main entry is over here on the right. You come in the vestibule to the public lobby. We have a couple service windows that are immediately accessible. Directly ahead is our dispatch center. And of course, if you've been upstairs in the police station currently, you know what that looks like. There's that window that leads you into where all the electronics are. Up to the top of the lobby is our access to our records. So if you're looking for a report, then you can go right to that window and get service there. Down below is our public interview room. And this is if you come in for a variety of reasons. This is sort of a multi-purpose space. If you're coming in to report a crime and you need to talk to an officer, it gives you a place to do it in a little bit of privacy. You can step away from that front desk and have a conversation. This can be particularly important if you're talking about something of a sensitive nature, so that little bit of privacy can make it a lot easier to communicate. And if, of course, there are small group meetings, if you're bringing your family in, there's a couple extra seats in there so that you have the ability to interact with the department in a professional manner. Continuing down the hall, there's a couple public restrooms out on the public side of the building, and then there's an access point into our community training room. This is a training room that serves police department needs, but can also be available for community needs. And the way we do that is because obviously when the police department is using it, we want a secure point, and so we can use our access control system to lock down these doors so that police training can go on without interruption. But if it's a community use, we can switch it and lock down this door and make these doors open so that the community can use it. It does have its required second egress out to the outside, so even when the community is using it, they have their 2 ways in and out of that space to meet the code requirements for egress. If we head back up through the lobby, there's a secure door that leads into the police station proper. Just to the left of that as you come in is our elevator that gets us up to the 2nd floor. But just behind records, we get our judge's chamber. We also get, as we turn the corner, we get our lieutenants' and sergeants' offices, our report prep room, and our roll call room, which is basically all the patrol spaces for the department as the administrative office space, as well as the space the officers need to do their pre-patrol briefings, and then also the space to come in and write reports from the incidents they deal with during the day. If we continue down to the end of that hall, there is oops, go left first. There is our mechanical space. There is one restroom down over there. And then we go down the other hallway, back down. There we go. That'll reconnect us back to the training room. And then we have access into the prisoner processing area. So we've got our prisoner processing counter and then a holding booth where you can place a detainee to sit down while you're going through that processing exercise. And then the doorway out to the Sallyport. The Sallyport's an important piece of bringing that in. That way you can bring in a cruiser right into the Sallyport. And the officer gets out and stores his weapon in a gun locker, and then brings the prisoner directly into the prisoner processing area. Because that area, the building, is secure, we're able to detain those folks inside that area of the building. They don't have free space, they're free right to wander throughout the whole police facility. They're contained in with that institutional occupancy. So you do the processing, you've got an interview room there. We have a bail bonding room so that if you've got somebody that you're holding but they're going to make bond, their bondsman can come in, meet with them, sign the paperwork, and they can be released back out on the public side of the building And we like to keep that away from the cruiser lot and the backside of the building, because sometimes people are a little grumpy after that. And we want to make sure that they walk out to the public side of the building and don't cause any mischief. We do have holding cells in that area. There are 4 of them. One of them is sized for handicap accessibility. Yeah, that's a thing. It's surprising sometimes. I remember the first time that I was told I had to make a handicap cell. The good news is other than a little bit more square footage, they're fairly simple. There's a slight difference in the toilet fixture, but all in all, it's a pretty simple situation. And it can be used for folks that are not handicapped as well. One of the big things here is to protect the custodial responsibility of the community. Basically, the police department has custodial care of these folks. They got to make sure that they're safe and they're protected and they don't come to harm, because that can lead to liability for the department and the community. So we go out of our way to meet the highest standards of detention facilities. We scour the country for those standards and make sure that we're meeting them, because it is all about safety and protection of liability for the community. All right, so if we go, oh, by the way, that bay down at the bottom, there's a vehicle processing bay right attached. That can be a second sally port if it's needed, but it can also be a bay if you're bringing in a vehicle that's part of a crime and you need to do investigative work on that vehicle, looking for evidence. You can do it right in there, use it as a temporary workshop. Both of the bays are sized for an ambulance to come in. It's not uncommon that you bring in a detainee and it's not long after it's time to send them to the hospital, for a variety of different reasons. But we want to make sure that an ambulance can get in the bay, open the back doors, get a stretcher out, get the detainee in, and then safely move on to medical care if it's required. All right, so moving upstairs, we'll go back out to the front lobby. We'll come up the elevator. There we go. And at the front of the building, we've got some administrative offices. Our chief is down in the corner with me here, and then the captains are above that. You've got a little overlook down into the lobby below. We do have one future office that's planned so that we have some accommodation for future growth, whether it's addition of services or a department. One of the things, well, we've seen 2 things coming up a lot lately. One is social services incorporated in the police department, and 2 is more computer or video evidence-oriented crime with the introduction of body cameras. We're seeing a lot of departments that add personnel to review that body camera footage and prepare it as evidentiary material. But social service is also a huge one that we've seen a lot of being added into police departments lately. Across the hall is some personnel file storage and a reprographics room. If we head up the hall and turn left, our detective bureau is up above us on the top of the page with some workstations, and then some supply storage and their own interview room for interviewing suspects or victims. There is a records archive behind the Detective Bureau where all of the back records, and police departments unfortunately still have to retain an awful lot of paper records. We've seen some jurisdictions that are allowing more and more electronic storage, but even those jurisdictions have a requirement for particular types of records being retained as hard copy. We have our armory facilities and our weapons cleaning. That weapons cleaning is an area where an officer can maintain their sidearm, but then the armorer can do a more extensive maintenance on that equipment. And then behind the armory is our evidence processing and storage facilities. And again, evidence is a little bit like the records. Some of it has to be stored for a very long time, so it can be a pretty significant demand on storage space. We use a high-density storage system so that we get more storage per square foot. Basically, those rolling racks, I don't know if you're familiar with them, but instead of having aisles between every rack, you can move the aisle and store a lot more in less square footage. And then finally, at the back of the facility, on the left side of the facility, are male and female locker rooms, our fitness center, a modest fitness room down at the end of the building, and then just up at the top of the entrance where the locker rooms is a little break room so that officers can have lunch, sit down on their break. There is a space over top of our training room, which we would plan for future growth so that someday in the future, if additional needs are come out, you don't have to start over with this exercise. You don't have to build an addition. You could simply close in that space and add square footage to support additional programs at some time in the future. If it doesn't happen, then it stays roof. So there's our floor plan. We did prepare a couple different options from an elevation standpoint. We'll go through those quickly. The first one is basically a flat roof option, a masonry and precast envelope so that we get low maintenance cost and high durability. We get, again, a prominent, easily identifiable main entry so that the visitors to the facility know exactly where to go. And then you get, again, it's about durability and protection with this facility. And then there's a pitched roof option. We've explored both, and there is a little bit of a cost difference here. Basically the same floor plan. In this case, we've got some pitched roofs up there. A lot of folks in New England love to have the pitched roofs on there because it gets the ice and snow off, but there is an added cost to get there. So we wanted to explore both options in this. A couple more views, and again, still that easily identifiable public entrance. So, we have been, obviously it's been a while since we spoke with the council here, and at the last time we talked, this thing was, what was the number, 18 million and change. Costs have continued to escalate, but not as rapidly as they did for a while. We saw some pretty aggressive escalation for a while. We're still seeing anywhere in the 6 to 8% increases. We're not seeing all the supply chains fixed yet, although a lot of the crucial ones have gotten dramatically better. We did a project in another community where bar joists were a huge problem. Fortunately, we had a construction manager who advised us of that, and we changed to steel and avoided some significant construction delays. Now they're telling us that bar joists are coming back available again, so that puts an option back on the table. There are two different cost scenarios that we ran. One of them was with our own cost estimator, and that's these numbers to the left. This is escalated out to mid-2025. That doesn't mean that's the only schedule that's available to you. I just wanted to point out, but this is mid-2025. The reason we do that is if you were to appropriate money in November, say, then by the time the drawings are out on the street and construction starts, usually construction costs are escalated to the midpoint of construction. We're anticipating a 16-month schedule for this construction, so the midpoint would be about halfway through 8 months into the construction period, and that gets us out to mid-2025. So the one on the left is our cost estimator, and that's a third-party estimator. It's a company called RLB out of Boston area. We do a lot of estimates with them, and I want to tell you a little bit about the mindset between these two estimates. The one on the right is from a construction manager, a company that we do a lot of work with. Actually, we're doing some schools with them in Rhode Island right now. They take a little bit different approach when they produce their estimates. My cost estimator wants to hit the middle of the pack. So on bid day, we could get, I don't know, 6, 8, maybe 10 bids. 10 bids would be a good day because we'd probably get better pricing that way. But my estimator is aiming for the middle of the pack because what he wants to make sure is that if he tells you a number today, that number is going to be good on bid day and through the construction. The construction manager has a different perspective. He wants to be involved in the process, and he wants to get you to a GMP. So he's actually aiming for the number that he actually wants to build this for, or would want to build it for if he were the guy. So you're going to see a little bit of difference right off the bat just because of that difference in approach. We're going to talk a little bit more about differences between construction manager and general contractor in a minute, but basically these two estimates are escalated out to the same side. This one was done a year ago by our cost estimator, then we were asked to validate it. We got a construction manager about 6 months ago to go back and take their own look at the same drawings, and this is the number they came up with, again, using their different perspectives. Did I miss it? Oh, and one thing else I want to talk about really quickly. I want you to be very, very careful about this because we hear this an awful lot. There's a difference between project cost and construction cost. People get those two mixed up all the time, and we get people saying, well, so-and-so did it for this amount of money. And what we find out is that's the construction cost, not the project cost. So the construction cost, in your case, is sitting around $16.6 million. That's the number that you want to see on bid day if you go that process. When you open up the bids from the general contractor, that's the cost you want to see. The project cost includes all of the other costs to go through this process that are not in the construction cost. And that can be a lot of things. It can be architectural engineering fees. It can be furniture, fixtures, and equipment costs. It's communications equipment. That's a big chunk of money there. It can be materials testing. It can be contingencies. And it's really important that when you go into a public bid project that you have a contingency. I've enjoyed a very low a very low, there's a bucket right here. A very low change order rate on projects, but still you always run into stuff that have to be addressed, so you've got to carry some contingency. So keep in mind there's construction cost and then there's project costs, and we're talking about total project costs here. Next slide. So here's an overview, and you have it in your packets. If you do a design bid build, you're kind of sitting in the situation that we've talked about thus far, where you're going to develop a set of construction documents, and that takes 8-9 months by the time you get through all your land use approvals and get all the drawings done. And basically what you're doing, you're moving forward through the process using your best judgment and our best judgment and our recommendations until you get to the point where you're ready to go to bid. And we're relying on cost estimator numbers through that whole exercise. And this is a good way. We do an awful lot of projects this way. Again, it relies a little bit on a lot of involvement on your part, on the owner's part, some of which, sometimes we have owners that are really good with the construction process and understand things. Sometimes we don't. So unless you bring in an outside owner's project manager or somebody like that, you're relying on your own expertise. It's really easy to make changes early on because, it's just between us. We can change things on the drawings as we're going and then get revised estimates for that. Once you go to bid, your construction cost is established so that on bid day you know what it is. And if it's at or below that number, it's a good day. If it's not, then you've got to go back and think about it. Again, we've had a real good record lately of not exceeding that number. In fact, we've had quite a few that have come in under that number, even during the pandemic. Going through the process again, there will be change orders. Contractors are often looking when you bid low bid. They come in at the lowest possible number they could get, and sometimes they look for a little opportunity to make some of that money up. And so they'll look for change orders, they'll look for opportunities to come back. That's where your contingency comes into play. And you're reliant on us. If you hire an owner's project manager, you can rely on them, and you're relying on your own expertise through the project. The other side of the equation is to go construction manager at risk. And basically, what you do is you hire a construction manager early on in the process, and you're hiring them to be a partner as you go through the process. And what they do oftentimes is get involved in looking at the drawings as we develop them and coming back and making suggestions. I told you the story about the bar joists. That was a construction manager who was doing a great job. He actually came up with a number of suggestions that helped us avoid delays and reduce costs for that particular project. You also have the freedom, because your construction manager is actually going to run the construction part of the process, and he fulfills a big part of the general contractor role, but he's working directly for you. You hire him based on qualifications. You can actually start phases earlier, and it's much simpler to do that. So for instance, if you wanted to do some site clearing or site prep or begin some foundations early, you can actually get those started before we've reached 100% of construction documents. So, much earlier in the process, we know what our foundations look like. We don't have all the details worked on the building. If you want to move faster, your construction manager can help you do that. Generally, these construction managers establish a GMP, so at some point during the process, during the design process, they'll submit the GMP. It does have some of their own contingency in it, which means not everything that comes out of the construction changes comes to you. Some of it gets covered under their contingency, but you get this guaranteed maximum price, which allows you to move forward with pretty good confidence. You still have a contingency for your own if you decide to make a change, which often happens. Owners often do make changes during construction. But they become your advocate during the process. The reason that they work directly for you is so that they're becoming your advocate, where the GC is the GC's advocate. So it gives you another partner in the process. This is particularly useful on large projects, complex project, or phased projects. Yours is not, I know from where you're sitting it feels like a large project, but in the scale of a construction market, yours is not a large project, but it is a bit complex because of the site phasing that needs to go on. So there could be some advantage to that. The one thing I will caution you, for many, many years, I was not a fan of construction managers. And that's because early on in my career, I ran into some construction managers who I didn't feel understood the difference in their role as the advocate for the owner. And I felt that sometimes they were too much the advocate of the contractors. In recent years, I have worked with a number of very, very good construction managers who've been real contributors to the process. We're completing a great big police facility in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts, and there hasn't been a better contractor, architect, owner relationship than with the construction manager we have on that project. And then there's others that I've had very good success with as well. So they're both really good options to explore. Really depends on whether you want to invest a little bit more soft cost money in getting an advocate on your team. But sometimes that soft cost money investment can actually pay for itself with the good suggestions that come out of the process and the opportunity to save time on the schedule. How'd I do? Here's the last one. So we had put this potential next steps together, and by the way, this is I think the last page before the closing, because a couple slides in there are actually old business. We were anticipating that you would go conceivably to funding in November. The project would sit tight until such time as funding was in place. Then we would, once you had the ballot vote, the funding approved, we would go through the design, development, construction document phases, building on the conceptual drawings that we have now. And, I will say that, what we sent to our estimator is probably 6-8 pages of drawings. At the end of the construction document phase, it will be more like 170 drawings and a spec book of over 1,000 pages. So there's a lot of detail work that goes into it from where we are today. Circa June of 24, you could begin advertising to bid and start your bid period. And this, by the way, is a GC bid process, a construction management process. You could start a little bit earlier. We've done that project I was just talking about in Massachusetts. We actually started site work and foundation work before our drawings were done and picked up about 2.5 months on the schedule. And 2.5 months these days means 2.5 months less escalation. So you would receive bids circa the middle of, beginning of September in 24, and then be looking at about a 16-month construction period. And again, you'd have to go through all those various phases of building the new building, first off relocating the parking, building the new building, moving into the building, and then demoing the old station and finishing up the site work and the outbuilding work. And so we would be anticipating completion somewhere around February of 2026. So with that, Paul, did you have some follow-up statements to make, or?
So the middle school that we completed in town, that was done construction management, design build with a GMP, guaranteed maximum price. Gave us the most amount of flexibility during the process, and I think the project came in on time and within the budget. It turned out, in my opinion, to be a really good project. Very comfortable throughout the process.
start talking about the repairs that could be done in combination with this, or?
Okay, I'm back. Gotta wet my whistle a little bit here. All right, so as a result of our study, the existing condition study, we did find a number of things that were pretty concerning about the existing structure. There does appear to be water infiltration that has gotten in over many years into the front of the building, probably through cracked flashings. We saw a lot of evidence in the roof of cracked flashings, particularly around mechanical units, around the access hatch, and along the front parapet where the signage is on the front of the building. And when we first went out there, we noticed some deformation of the existing front facade. And of course, you know, we've been watching that building now for a couple years, and I can tell you without a doubt that deformation has gotten substantially worse. Our structural engineer, who was out back at the beginning of the process, had walked through the building and had noted his concerns about that front elevation, and we had him back in November, I believe it was, and he was struck by how much worse the conditions were than they were the first time he visited. And basically what happens is you get moisture coming down through the roof, and it's getting into your brick wall. And in a building like that one, you've got a multi-wythe brick wall. So basically, it's 3 rows of brick attached to one another with mortar in between, so brick, brick, brick. And that's your entire assembly of wall. There's not gaps for insulation in those old buildings. And what they do to tie the wall together is they'll take header bricks. So basically, you know, they'll take one brick, and bricks are rectangles, and they turn them in. So every periodically, you'll see a header brick. And if you go and you look at the front elevation of that building, you'll see the header bricks. What we believe has happened is water has gotten down in that wall, so it seeps through the mortar, and then the building gets cold and freezes. And when it freezes, the water expands and is popped, and we believe that it has broken many of those header bricks. So it's clear from observation that at least the outer wythe of the brick is starting to peel away. We don't know if that goes much deeper into the second wythe of brick. Right now we suspect and hope that it's the outer wythe of brick. But what we're seeing is some pretty good deformation. You can see there are a lot of cracks along that front facade that are happening as bricks get displaced and pushed out. This whole section, it's hard to see in this photo, but it bows out pretty substantially. The copper fascia, when we started, there were gaps there. Now the gaps are significant, and animals are going up and living in there. So our engineer is strongly recommending that we stabilize the front of the building. And so in the immediate repairs that we're looking at, our engineer came back and said, look, what you got to do is make sure that the building is stabilized before you start messing with that brick wall. So what he's doing is recommended that we build a stud partition just inside that front elevation of the building. And we don't have to sheetrock it, we don't have to make it a solid wall. But basically, you'll get a sill plate, you'll get studs every 16-inch on center going up to pick up the roof joists, the ceiling joists. And then we'll do the same thing between the ceiling joist and the roof joist so that you pick up the load of all of those wood members that currently go into the brick wall and bear on it. And there's a couple reasons we're doing that. First off, because we are concerned about the stability of that exterior wall, but we're also concerned about whether that moisture has rotted out the joist ends as well. And the one thing we don't want to have happen is start messing with the wall and having the ceiling joist collapse. So the recommended first step is to build this stud partition. Again, it doesn't have to be sheathed, but it does need to pick up the load to stabilize the joist so that you can begin doing work on the exterior of the masonry. We have a couple options from there, and it starts with doing a couple test holes. Basically, we will remove some squares of the existing outer wythe of the brick so that we can see what's going on in the inner withes of the brick. If we pull off that outer wythe and things are stable and the back withes are really solid, then all we need to do is use some anchors that will help tie that outer withe back to that inner withe and hold it to stabilize it. Now, this isn't a permanent fix, but it is a good stabilization of the building that will make it safe for a few years. If we find that the conditions are a little worse and that deterioration extends into the second withe of brick, then we have the option of taking off the outer withe of brick and building basically a stud partition and putting some metal siding on it so that we can, again, stabilize the outside of the building until some bigger project comes along. We're hoping we can get away with that anchor solution. It's more cost effective for you, and it would be less unsightly in the long run for the police station. But that'll buy us time. It'll stabilize that front facade so that operations can continue until such time as another alternative is pursued. One other big thing about that is there had been some asbestos investigation done before, some hazardous material investigation. We do know that there are some asbestos-containing materials. We've reached out repeatedly to the hygienist that did that previous study and have been unsuccessful in getting them engaged in the project. So I believe that this body approved a fee to bring in another hygienist who's going to double check the results and then put together the specifications for removal where we need to build the new wall. So basically, it's not full hazmat abatement. We believe that there's asbestos fibers in the old plaster ceiling, so they'll write the specs for removing that section of the ceiling so that we can get those new stud wall right up and bearing on the wood framing. So there'll be some site investigation, some testing, and then the writing of specifications and preparing the drawings so that we can bid that scope of work so that the general contractor that does that work can properly and appropriately abate that portion of the work and get the stud wall in there so that we can do the stabilization of that wall. Other than that, there are only a few other minor repairs that are included in that scope of work. We've got a railing that's been badly damaged. It looks like a vehicle hit it. It's at a stairway. We want to straighten that out. There's a column cap at the landing at the back of the building where the column cap is deteriorating. We want to repair that. There's some water infiltration along the handicap ramp. Basically, that ramp was built right up against the existing brick wall, and so water is landing on the ramp, and it's seeping into the brick wall. If you go into those offices on the lower level, you can see that there's lots of peeling paint and buildup of materials, of minerals that are seeping through that wall with the water. So we want to at least mitigate that. A full repair is a much more extensive job, but we want to seal up that joint so that we can at least slow down that deterioration. And there is a door, sorry. Oh yeah, and we're going to repair a lot of those cracked flashings. This is not a total re-roofing, but the idea is to go around where all those cracks are in the flashings, at the parapet, at the access hatch, which is, you can almost stick your fingers down in that crack, and around the equipment so that, again, the building will be stabilized until such time as a decision to either invest more money into it or to seek another solution occurs. So anything else on that?
I would say the only other additional scope, which you I think started to allude to, is there is a door that has been severely damaged by water, so it's rusted out to the point where it can't be secured, and it does go into the secure side of the facility. So the replacement of that door, that is another area of scope we are being conscientious of. All of the exterior caulking is also assumed to contain asbestos-containing materials, so that exterior caulking is another area in addition to the ceiling tiles that we will be having our hygienists look at specifically. And outside of that, I think the other note is that that stud wall, that brace wall that is being constructed, it does kind of go right through interior spaces, the current interview room, report room. So the department is making accommodations to kind of move their equipment that's in that space, but that stud wall really just kind of comes down and through those spaces, and no other interior renovations are included in the scope of these immediate improvements.
And just one last note: we're keeping some options in our bid package so that we can make sure that the task force is making best use of the money that is available. So we have some alternates in there, and, hopefully, like I said, if we can get away with stabilizing that brick facade with anchors, that's going to help go a long way to making sure the budget is adequate for the task.
Jeff, the other thing was the sidewalks.
Oh, yeah, yes, sir. Sorry about that. Yeah, we have a lot of sidewalk panels, the concrete panels that have heaved and have created tripping hazards. Some of them are decaying badly, particularly as you come up to the main entry and even up on the ramp. There's some really bad spalling where the surface of the concrete is breaking away. And aside from not meeting the accessibility standards, it is a tripping hazard and a risk for anybody walking up to that building. Get it all out.
May I? May I? So these issues that you've just been talking about, the current services, that was what was brought to our attention by the Interlocal Trust in '22, and nothing has been done since '22 to address any of these issues. We did have a 30-day and a 90-day requirement to make those changes. How come they haven't been done, and what, if anything, are we getting fined? Are we going to have a problem with that with the Interlocal? Does anybody know? And if the
Yeah.
administrator is going to talk, can we bring him the?
Well, that was the point of our Zoom call in, I think it was June 30th. We talked to the author of the report
Okay.
to try to get clarification on what needed to be done now,
Right.
what we could hold off on. I mean, some of the 30-day stuff was addressed, this caution tape in front of the building and that type of stuff. We wanted to get a better handle on the 90-day stuff. And as I reported to you the last council meeting, he advised us to address the liability issues, which we went through. That was the sidewalk and, the brick falling off, but not to, for lack of better terms, not to go crazy with money, because in his eyes, the building wasn't salvageable. And he was cognizant of the fact that we had plans for a new police station, so.
You're saying the Interlocal Trust told us that the building wasn't salvageable? Because that's not what they indicate in the letters that they sent to us.
Right, there's a difference between the letter and what he spoke to us about. His exact words
Okay.
was, in his opinion, the building was beyond repair.
So is
And I
it,
was a little bit taken back. So
Yeah.
I wrote it down in my notes. After that, I really didn't take notes because I was doing a lot of the talking. But, I mean, he was pretty clear. And again, town administrator and the public works director were in
Yes.
on that Zoom call.
so are they planning on putting that in writing for us?
No, I think he's waiting for us to come back with this repair plan. That would
Well,
satisfy.
wouldn't it be to our advantage for liability issues to have a written, documentation saying that it is not habitable or salvageable?
That's really not my call. I mean,
Yeah,
the
I-
letter went to the town, not to the building committee,
Right,
so.
right. Okay, I have a lot of questions, but I don't want to, whoever wants to, go ahead. You want to start?
Do we want to open up to any public comment, and so we can have public dialogue, or anyone want to make a motion?
Can I just ask one question before we do, and then I can make a motion? It goes to the architect. Was there any consideration for a single-story building? I know a lot of communities around build them. I think Smithfield has one, Coventry built one, I think Portsmouth has one. Could be wrong on that one. But it seems to be that there's a lot of towns, especially smaller communities, that have a single-story police with consideration for additional space needed for the future. I think Situate's in the process of building one. Theirs building is, I believe, beyond repair and being fined by the government potentially. They're trying to avoid. So I just want to know, if we're talking about a $21 million project with a $16 million building, seems kind of large and a lot of dollars. I disagree with you on a big project for this town. That's like half the town's budget. So it's a big project. So was there any consideration taken?
We absolutely talked about the advantages of a single-story building. Unfortunately, we were tasked with evaluating the existing site, and while maintaining the operations of the existing building, there just wasn't room to do a single-story building on the site.
May
Just one more follow-up. So when you say there's non-existing, what, if you could just visualize for me, how far out would a single-story building go?
How far away?
How far out in the existing space? Like, I know you have like the perimeter, and it looks like you have an outer perimeter, and then you have the parking spaces,
Yeah, this yellow area here is
the double.
the proposed new construction. And then, of course, that gray area is the existing building.
Yep.
And, I will also point out that, we still have the capacity for doing the municipal court. Although that was scaled back pretty substantially, they decided that they would adjust the schedule so they could have smaller audiences and thus reduce the size of that space. That was one of those cost savings or square footage saving. But we still do have a pretty good parking area to support that function. This is larger than a police station without a municipal court would have. So if that function were not here and we didn't have to work around the existing building, a single story would be possible. There are a couple schools of thought on that. When you do a single story building, you get a lot more envelope, which can raise costs. You get more roof area, you get more exterior wall. The flip side of that is, when you do a two-story building, then you end up with stairs and elevators. And, those are spaces that don't add to your program, but they add to your cost. So there's sort of a balance between, the two options. They both have cost drivers and they both have cost savers. But really the reason why we didn't explore it is just insufficient site area.
Okay, thank you.
So I just have a question. So the municipal court, that's going to be in the training room, the community center area?
That's
going to
correct.
be the court? So in that room, is there a secured area for payments or for the clerk?
That happens at that records office out off the front lobby. In the previous larger scheme, we had that up on the upper floor. In this scheme, we brought it downstairs, so it's right inside. You come in and you turn to the right, and there's a secure transaction window to the clerk.
So people are coming out of the court, they're going back down past dispatch and going into that other entrance?
They'd go to that service window,
Oh, there's a service window at that office.
right there.
Okay.
So from here to there.
Any more questions?
Do we have a cost for the temporary fixtures that we're gonna make? Do we have an approximate cost for the temporary repairs?
It's at the estimator right now.
Ballpark?
From a ballpark standpoint, we were working under the amount that was remaining relative to the study, so we were kind of working towards that number. I believe in totality, that remaining monies in total project cost was around $1 million, so our hard cost was about half of that. So I think we were shooting in that range of maybe $600,000 plus or minus for all of that repair work. Had to kind of stay within that budget. We also don't have all of the information on that abatement asbestos containing material scope. So that is something that we're looking currently to include, and we have the rest of the package with a cost estimator, and he or she is looking at kind of pricing out all of those different alternate and scope related items so that we can make sure that all of that fits within that budget.
Okay, because I support, I know we need a new police station, I'm 100% behind it. What I have a problem with, though, is pouring good money into a building that we want to knock down. So what would be did we look into the possibility of double wides and just wrapping a bunch of tape around that building and just shutting it down, putting the police in double wides? I know it can be done, I've seen it done.
On the same site?
Yeah.
And then build the building there? Or did you
Well,
use the
that's
same
a good
permanent
point. Well,
solution?
I don't care where we got to put them somewhere, but they put $1 million, almost $1 million into that building that we're going to tear down. Double wides would cost us, I looked into it very briefly, of course, but double wides would cost us about $3,000 a month each.
Mhm.
It'd take a long time to get to $1 million at $6,000 a month.
Well, Well, first off, you've also got the cost of
The setup and all
the
that,
setup
I
and
understand.
all of that as well, but double wides don't make very good detention facilities.
We could work on it, I've seen it done. We can work on an arrangement with Woonsocket or Smithfield for, you know, and I just have a hard time pouring that kind of money into a building that we're gonna knock down.
So again, are you suggesting this is a temporary facility solution or is a permanent solution?
The double wides?
Yeah.
No, that would be a temporary solution.
Oh, well then, again, I think the only challenge with doing that is a temporary, I have done that before. At my prior firm, I worked on Westford, Massachusetts. Took a minute to recall that, where we temporarily relocated them into double wides, and they struck a mutual aid agreement with the Chelmsford, Mass.
Right.
To do their processing, and we had them in, I think, 3 double wide units. I don't remember the costs, and they wouldn't mean anything because it was such a long time ago. So it is a temporary possibility. What I would suggest is that it would be better done on a different site, because with all the construction activities, the existing building, and then the operations, I think that'd be too much to safely handle on the site.
Right.
So if you had an alternate site that you could use for a temporary facility and set that up, certainly done it in the past.
And just to add to that, that could potentially open up the opportunity to demoing the existing building and alleviating the pressure on site, which could
Exactly.
open up the possibility
Exactly.
to explore a single-story option and less of a site constraint and the costs of site logistics of moving around the existing facility and multi-phases of construction.
Thanks, I was gonna ask and follow up. I agree with Councilman Biragad. I don't think throwing $1 million at a building, if we do end up deciding to tear it down, it just seems like that money could be used elsewhere.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
You guys, how do you feel about that possibility, instead of pouring it into the building, going with, David, I know that, you know all about the construction business, so do you think that's a feasible idea?
Yeah, John, I think it's feasible. I don't know that, from a numbers standpoint, whether or not it's gonna work. I mean, the cost of the double wides is minor compared to what it's gonna cost to get them up and furnish them and get them running and everything. I just think you're gonna spend, I don't know, between $200,000 and $500,000 to get those double wides working.
Oh, that much?
It's not a cheap, they're not expensive to rent, but then you gotta set them up and everything. They've gotta meet some kind of code. You're gonna have some services that you have to meet. It's more complicated than that. And I'm not one who wants to throw money away. I certainly don't want to put money into that old building.
Right.
It's worth looking at.
I just know that I've seen it done, when they were rebuilding the state police headquarters. We had the SWAT team, the commercial enforcement, detectives, all in double wides behind, in the parking lot. So it can be done, I just don't know what the cost is compared to putting into the building temporarily,
Yeah, again, the question is there a site that's available? If there is, great.
Right.
Then it's easy to start looking at that.
Jeff, I have a question to that, and we have an estimator that's estimating this project right now to make the repairs. Can you also put some numbers on what it would cost to put some double wides together on another site?
I can certainly ask him to do that, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, what about the corner
It'd be nice
of,
to know what
St.
site.
Paul? They
So
got
I
that
know
whole
what I have
empty
for
lot.
utilities.
You could rent it.
St. Paul, the fire station, got that whole extra lot.
So I guess the question would be, how would you envision doing that? So in other words, if the decision is made to do a new police station, you have to go through the bond referendum. If it passes, I guess that's when you start working on the double wides. But if it doesn't pass, you still have a building that's a liability that's getting worse.
Right, it's a fair question, but if it doesn't pass, then it'll be a lot easier to repair the building if they're not in it. Right?
So would you move them out before Bonding approval?
Yeah, I get that. I would shut that building down, and wrap some tape around that building and condemn it as soon as you can.
And sure, yeah.
But I don't think it needs to be condemned, right? There's
It's falling apart.
No, I mean, there are issues, right? There are things that have been addressed that, well, we haven't addressed that have been brought to our attention, right? That would not nearly come close to any of the costs that we're throwing around right now. So you haven't been charged at all with looking at a different site or for a different configuration of a building? The only thing that you've been charged with to date is the existing location, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. So my question,
No, excuse me, if I may.
yes,
We have looked at all of that.
okay,
Early on in the process, when Tecton was first hired under their first contract, that's exactly what we did.
okay,
We looked at other sites, other layouts, and it was determined through going through the process that the station should be sited at that site, based on the needs of the police department and what their concerns were. And I know that Hollowell is the elephant in the room, and we'll address it, that we looked at putting it at Hollowell.
Oh.
And you have one means of egress
Right.
and ingress into that site. It sits at the bottom of a hill. It wasn't conducive to putting a police station there.
right,
And so we kind of eliminated that. But we eliminated it using what the police department was saying their needs were and how they needed to operate. So we did look at that. It wasn't just, Tecton wasn't just saying, oh no, just put a building on this site. When they originally started, they talked about the test fits and all of that,
right,
those were some of the things that we looked at. Where we could put this building, where it would sit, what the configuration would be and all of that. That was all done over 2 years ago, when they issued their original report that was requested by 2 previous councils to say, okay, we went to the council, the task force went to the council, and we said, we have approximately $1 million. These are the issues that we need to address on this building. The roofs, the facade, the windows, and a few other things. And we asked them, what are your priorities? And the charge came back was, find out what the actual cost would be to rehab that building to bring it up to current standards, or to build a new building. So we could compare the two. And they came in almost identical. And in the construction business, David could address this probably better than I can. If the cost of building new, or the cost of
rehabbing,
the cost of new and the rehab is 65%, I believe it is, you're better off building new, and they were almost at 100%. So the obvious choice was to build new. So you would have a current, up-to-date building that meets the requirements and the standards that are set today. The building that you currently have, even if we spent $18 million rehabbing it, would still be on 4 different levels, would still be in, I don't want to say, it would be inadequate for what their needs are today. They don't have proper storage, they don't have proper evidence storage. There's a host of issues, and even spending that money wouldn't address a lot of those issues. That's why we're at the point that we're at now, looking at a building on that site, because that's what the police feel
right,
is what's best for that. So we have looked at other sites on all of this. Now, to try to tie this all together without getting into, well, it's on the agenda, so we can address it about a bond question. The reason that we're here tonight is that we've got to a point that the task we were given was to address immediate repairs to the building to tie us on to a certain point. And we're here now tonight, and that's on there because, so that we're not wasting a lot of money, we want to see what the immediate repairs are, and we're almost ready to go out to put that out on the street to bid. And our hope was, in a perfect world, that we would put a bond question out late in the spring, middle of May, beginning of June, the two would come together almost at the same time. We would know if the bond passed or not. At which point, we would know how much we needed to do to keep this building going for the future. Or we would know we don't have a bond passed. Now we need to know what are we gonna do because this is it. That's why we're here now, because those two pieces now, the two tasks that we've been given are coming together. May or June is the opportune time. That's why we're looking at this now, that we want to update a new council with new members. We want to update you that. But that's the point of this, is that we're not trying to spend money that we don't need to. But in order to have that answer, we need to have that two pieces come together at the same point.
But you do have something similar to that. You've already said that you have the rehab cost and the new costs are almost simultaneously the same, right? So is that,
Yeah.
so the amount of money that we're going to be putting into just sustaining this building for X amount of months or years, right? Is it months or years that we would be able to keep that building operational the way it is right now?
We're looking to secure the exterior of the building.
Yep, and all those
To
issues.
meet the requirements of the trust in order to
Right.
continue to carry insurance on the building.
Yep.
That's what we're trying to do
Okay,
while we wait to build a new building. But we can't keep waiting to build a new building. And that's why I say, to address the concerns of wasting money, we got two things coming together. If we know that there's a bond gonna pass, it will determine what we do for those immediate repairs, what we need to do. If the bond doesn't pass, then we're gonna know we need to do more. It's
Well,
going, the way they're looking to bid it is with add alternates, and so we have flexible options on, well, we can do this, or we can do this, or we might not have to do this. If you follow me, but it's all contingent on knowing what we're doing in the future.
well, I guess I'm confused because, and please just, I'm new to this whole process, I haven't been paying attention to it. So if you're telling us that we have two costs that are very similar for a rehab of a building or building a new building, right? Why, how are we gonna put that to the voters? Do you know what I mean? Like, if we even put a bond question, we're not being honest with them because there is a possibility that it could be a lesser amount, right, for a rehab. So
Now,
we would only be putting,
this rehab that we're talking about tonight is nothing even.
no, I know.
We would have
but-
to take the police department out
Out,
of that building
Mm-hmm,
and spend money, again, to temporarily house them,
right.
to come in,
And do
fix the
rehab.
facade and fix the windows, but they're still in an old building. It's not a complete replacement of the building, and you're
Right.
still gonna have inferior standards in the building that won't be addressed.
If I may.
Please.
Again, the rehab option, that was explored under the bigger program. So we don't currently have a rehab option on the table.
Okay.
Because particularly after the removal of scope and the downsizing, that option was left in the past, if you will. However, what I do want to say about the rehab option is it is a substantial reconstruction.
Okay,
This isn't a building that we just have to restore. It's substantial reconstruction. The repairs that we're doing on the front of the building are because that is the worst area of the building. We do see indications that some of that problem has extended to the other sides of the building as well. So again, I think, number one, it is a substantial reconstruction.
right.
Now, at the end of the day, you'd end up rebuilding a lot of the building, particularly the entire front wall, replacing all the windows, replacing the doors, gutting the HVAC system, replacing that with new. I think the real downside that you end up with restoring this building, and believe me, I love restoring old buildings. I've done a couple great police stations in old buildings. The problem that we end up with here is this mishmash of floors, which creates some really operational inefficiency. So you'd have a building that's good to go for another 25, 50 years, maybe longer, but those operational efficiencies that would happen within the building would live with you forever. And that's why at the end of the day, even though the options were similar in cost from the police department's operational perspective, they found a new construction arrangement much more conducive to efficient operations than the renovation option.
Okay. One of the other questions I had about relocating parking spaces for, while we're doing construction, if we were going to do that. And so that's an additional cost. Has that been factored in?
I don't have a cost for that. There had been talk about some adjacent property that might be available to utilize for that. Paul, did you have anything further on that?
I haven't done any updates, right? The one next door.
No. There were possibilities that they could use the front lawn for some parking if they needed to, like we did, kind of like we did at the middle school, where we created an impervious parking lot, because it's temporary.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't gotten to that point yet. I would think that we haven't said, yeah, here's a cost that it's gonna cost to put this here, but we don't know what it's gonna be. It's in the project that we know that we need to do it,
Right.
but we can't say, well, it's gonna be this amount of money to do it.
And there were signs, I haven't seen them lately, the front portion of the Stop and Shop, they had advertised that space.
Hmm.
That's where they used to store the Peapod trucks, I think.
Now they're storing tree removal trucks.
Yeah.
No, it's tree removal.
Maybe they've rented it out to
They may
somebody
have,
else,
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, so what would be the cost of, and again, just looking at the rehab, I know it's off the table for right now, I'm not sure why, but what about the new roof versus a repair to the roof? What would a new roof cost if we went ahead with a new roof on that building?
I haven't priced a roof lately, but probably in excess of $20 a square foot at this point, I would think. Dave?
Okay. And how many square feet are we talking?
About $23 a square foot.
23.
23?
I remember that rehab option also was an addition. It was a significant addition as well as rehabilitation of that building, so it's.
In addition to it, right. Okay. Go ahead.
So, I'm still gonna come back to, I just think this station is way too big for our community. I mean, we have 26 police officers, and this is 22,000 square feet. So do you have any towns that you've done a building in about our size? And what kind of square feet or square foot were that one?
We have done police stations from everywhere from 9,000 square feet to 70,000 square feet.
Right, but I'm saying something in
In
this,
communities of your size, I think you are a little bit on the high side, but we are seeing in the 18,000 square foot range pretty commonly. The problem is there are certain things of this that are not scalable because you're a smaller community. The Sallyport that houses an ambulance is what it is.
Mhm.
I see the space that an ambulance takes is what it is. Cells are, they're mandated sizes. So there are elements that are not scalable. There are some that are. You can change office sizes. You can change your training room size. I have built this program based on the information provided to me by the police department. And then we went back to them and scaled it down again afterwards. I'm happy to have continued dialogue about that, but basically it's a statement of the department needs.
okay. So once again, what town have you built a station in around our size? So that this is you built so many, so you must know what you've done with a town our size.
What's your population right now?
Like
I don't recall.
10,000, 10,
12.
12,000, maybe 4,500 households? So did you just say you built Sutton? Did
We're
you just say
thinking
you built
Sutton,
Sutton?
Massachusetts was similar, and that was about 17,000 square feet.
Mhm. Yeah, I went to see that one. That one is very nice, and it's a lot smaller than ours, and it seems like there's a lot more better space or use of space. they have kind of an open, I mean, I know you know, but they have like an open roll call area instead of
Yeah,
all different break areas.
Sutton is a very unique department. They are very, very collaborative in their operations, which enabled us to do a lot more open space. We talk about this when we plan any police station. They embraced it fully.
Yeah. So is there any others that you can think of?
I've done a lot. I think Wilbraham is also in the 18,000 square feet, but I think that's a little bit bigger community. I don't recall what Hudson, New Hampshire was when I did their station. That goes back a ways. That was a 14,000 square foot facility. Lebanon, New Hampshire was a 14,000 square foot facility. Dayton, Massachusetts was, I think, just over 10,000 square feet. I don't recall their population size right now.
So Dayton has a 10,000 square foot station?
I believe that's correct, yes.
And how long ago did you do that one?
That's been completed for 2 or 3, I'm gonna guess 3 years right now.
Did you do Portsmouth?
No.
Point out, though, that I don't think you can base on population alone, because we have Park Square, we have the, the plaza up there, we have Walmart, we have a highway going right through the middle of our town. You can't, that's comparing apples to apples, because you might get a community that's about the same size as ours that doesn't have Dowling Village, or it doesn't have a highway going through their town. So I think it might be a little misleading just going strictly by population.
Yeah, I understand that, but you can go see Bellingham too, which is also a lot bigger town than ours, a lot bigger population, and their station is nothing like this station. Like, I just feel like we're building a station that's way too big for our town, and to try and sell this to the public, I mean, after we just had a total reval and everyone's taxes went up, and now we're gonna say, okay, now we're gonna go out, and now it's $21 million and not 18 anymore. So I just don't see why, I mean, there's a lot of fluff in this police station. There's no other way to say it, but it seems like it's just way too big. And then to have future expansion, what could we possibly expand on it? I mean, it's pretty big as it is now, so I don't know. I still think there's a lot that can come out of here, but I mean, I guess the residents will answer that question, but I just think that this $21 million is just a lot to swallow. And then when do you think you'll have the test results back of that front wall to know if we really need to do all those repairs?
Well, we know we need to do repairs to the front wall. The question is how extensive, but
Right.
the way it's part of that bid package. So one of the first phases after they build this shoring wall would be to open up some holes in the outer white. So they're gonna basically take a patch of bricks out of there so that we can see the layers beyond. And then that will tell us which of the options included in the bid package need to be employed to repair the wall. So if the second and third wides are solid, then we should be able to put those anchors in and tie the wall back together and stabilize it for a few years.
So you can't just do that in small sections of samplings? You have to do like the whole wall? You have to rebuild?
No, we test it in small sections.
Yeah.
And then once we see what it is, then we go in and do it, do the appropriate repair. I don't remove bricks. So I've got to get a contractor on board to do that.
Right.
I'm not sure you'd want my masonry skills patching the wall either. So.
And just a little bit more insight on that exterior width of brick. All of the windows and precast elements are actually bearing within that exterior width. So we can only do that testing above the upper level of windows. So it's kind of up near where the old signage is. So that's where we would do that kind of small demolition to see that extent of damage. The anchors will be throughout the entire front facade, height and width, but we would only be looking to remove the bulging part of that front width, if allowed, which would be above the windows. So we cannot remove the entire exterior front width, because we would have to also then relocate the windows and all of the precast elements, and that would be a full deconstruction of that front exterior facade. So it's just really the portion above those upper windows that would be removed if possible.
I know I'm probably asking the same questions over and over again, but my taxes went up $1,000 just from the reval. And that's before any projects, and we have other projects that are in the wings, that are in the works. We have grants, we have things that we need to do, we have to continue on with Hallowell and other things. So I guess my question is how, before we can do any of this, I think we need to have a very fair assessment of what kind of financials we have in this town. You know, what is the fiscal impact of a $21 million project over a 30-year period for people? How much is that going to increase their taxes? How much is the senior center, multi-generational location going to add to the taxes? And so there are several things in the works, and I don't think we have a good handle on. You do have a good handle? Okay, please, handle away.
I've been dealing with FTM Financial.
Yep,
I was dealing with Cynthia, now I'm dealing with Jerry Ann.
okay.
And I know you're focusing on the higher number, but I think this committee, we're focusing on the lower number because we believe that construction management is really the way to go. So it's really a $20 million project. A $20 million project would be approximately 67 cents per thousand. So on an average home, which is $400,000 in this town, it would be $268 a year. But
Yep.
in 2026, you're gonna retire $11 million of debt. In 2028, you're gonna retire, should have brought my glasses, $17.1 million. And so
Mhm.
the burden would lessen, and depending on,
Yes, yes.
and I'm sure you could work, and I'm sure you could, the finance people on here, but I know that you can sit down and work with them on how to go about bonding this project out so that the impact would be less as you go along. You follow me? They may allow you to do temporary bonds and then do financing as some of this is retired.
Yep.
And so within 2028, you're gonna retire $27 million of debt.
Mhm.
So it's kind of lining up in a nice position right now, where even if I look at it that for $250 for the average homeowner to get a new police station, I think this is something that we need to pursue.
Okay, and, you know, I agree with you that we'll be having retirement of our, you know, other bonds. However, we have other things coming on other than this project. And
Oh,
see,
I understand.
I get very worried. I'm very conservative when it comes to finances. And, you know, I feel that my job is to represent the average person who elected me to do the work that they think is important for them, right? And what's important for them is road work, their trash, and keep their taxes down, right? So we haven't done road work in so long. There are so many things that we need in this town that cumulatively could have a very deleterious effect on the tax rate. And I don't think we have a grasp on that yet. I understand this, and I think you've done a fantastic job. This is the first time I get the, you know, the figures, and I appreciate that tremendously. But that doesn't preclude other things coming into the picture that we'll be adding on to the taxes. So I don't feel comfortable going forward unless we have that big picture. I don't know how anybody else feels.
Well, I'd like to point out that when we talk about rehabbing the building, you're rehabbing a school. If we're gonna rehab that building to make it a new school, a new elementary school, that's one thing, but it was never a police station.
Right.
It's just not a police station. It's a school. It's designed to be a school. Police stations are very different designs. I just want to, you weren't on the council at the time when I made this story. I told you a quick story. When I was a young trooper, the barracks was just like it was in 1925. There was not much had been done to the barracks in all that time, back in 1990. Well, we went to the Cranston Police Department. In Cranston Police, you pull into the Sally Port, secure your weapon, all the cells are on the same thing, cameras everywhere, interview rooms. They have since leveled that police station. We would be lucky to have a police station like that. They have since leveled that police station because it wasn't modern enough and built a new modern police station because that one wasn't modern enough. We would be thrilled just to have that police station that they leveled. We are in desperate need of a new police station, trust me. That is not a police station, it's a school.
So then the next question would be, if that's the case and people agree, then that's a given, then we move forward with the project. If they disagree, what's our fallback? What do we do? I mean, we're saying now the building is already well, I don't even want to use the term uninhabitable, but it's not stable or whatever the term is that we're using, right? I don't want to embellish it. You know, if a bond issue gets in front of bond counsel in time and we get in front of the legislature and we can put it in for this year, okay. If something happens then we have to postpone it till the following year, till the general election, and put it on as a ballot question in '24. Now we're saying people are in a building that they shouldn't be in, right? So if that's, if it failed for whatever reason, because people didn't want to spend the $268 a month extra or whatever, or they didn't feel that at this point this is something, what is our backup? I mean, I think we should have a backup, just in the unlikely event that that doesn't get passed, and we don't know that. We don't know what people will do.
All due respect, this project started
Oh, I know when it started.
11 years ago.
Believe me, I know.
We've been together for 7 years,
Mm-hmm.
working on this. And just in this case, if we abandon this immediate repairs thing and say we don't want to do that now, you spent $80,000 and now you have nothing to show for that. There's a waste of money. But we're at the point that there is no other choice. You need to replace that building. You have no other choice other than to replace that building. And if it's not replacing it with a new building, then it's fixing that building. Either way, you're gonna be spending $20 million. And the smarter move is build a new building. You're at that point that there is no other choice. Take anyone through that building. You have people, the personnel board meets there. They're aghast at the building. And you know what? I don't have a problem saying it publicly. The administrative may be nervous. You guys may be nervous. That building is the biggest liability that this town is sitting on right now. Not only for your police officers, but for every person that you bring into that building and arrest for your custodial duties. The liability is huge. And you need to make a decision, what are you gonna do? The recommendation from this board, and I'll speak for them, and if they wanna speak for themselves, I think they can, is we need to replace the building. We need to start that process immediately. It's not a question of what if it fails? No, we need to take the approach that it will pass. And I really believe it will pass, because people know the condition of the building. Walk around town and ask people, have you been in the police station? And they're embarrassed by it, I'm telling you. There are more people in this community that are saying it's about time that we replace that building, that we need to build a new building. And we're at that point that if you don't want to do that, then you're gonna have to find a different option. It won't be us that will do it. It won't be me that will be doing it. We've chased the tail to the point that this is it. We need to build a new building. And that's why I say, from my point of view, you're at that critical point now where you're gonna have two pieces coming together. One is saying, are we gonna build a new building? And then how are we gonna keep this building going for 2.5 years? And they're coming together at one point, and we need to get that to that point in May or June of this year. That's my opinion. I think that they're of the same ilk,
Yeah.
but I won't speak for them.
I have a quick question. Jeff, worst case scenario, if those test sites
to try and attach the brick to the building again? What happens if it doesn't work,
Well, that's why we had a couple different options in the package.
right?
You know, if we can't use the anchors, then we would strip off all the outer white, the brick above
Put
the precast line,
Mhm.
and basically build a stud wall to stabilize the rest of it. It would have a metal skin on it. It's not a fancy solution, it's a Band-Aid. You know, that's the fallback position that we had in place for that.
So every part of it is a Band-Aid.
And the brace wall would stay in place, by the way.
Thank you.
I just want to say one thing, and then we can open it up if we want. I know we talked about it a while ago. So I don't, I'm just trying to think of how to word this. Give me a second. So if the people in town may recognize that we need a new police station, you know, I don't think anyone would disagree that the building is in disrepair. You know, when we, Paul, Terry, when we were on the council in 2019, we were talking about the building potentially falling apart. It's shocking that we're still sitting here talking about making repairs when we knew we had to make repairs years ago. And I worry about what does the preventative maintenance look like of a building like this, of this size. There's no future cost planning done. There's no asset management cost planning done. You know, we could find, I don't want to see us find ourselves in a situation now like we are in, and we built a $20 million police station only for it to fall apart after 15 years. Doesn't seem like a great return on investment. But I think $20 million is a lot of money. And whether it's 20 or 21, you know, that's $1 million. That's not a lot of money when you're talking about a $20 million project. I still think it, to the point of what Council President Alves said, there's a lot of space in here I think that needs to scale back. 30%, I don't know what the difference between mission critical and office space is. It seems like storage for evidence would be a mission critical need, not an office need. So I'm assuming you're talking about all the offices. You know, does the municipal court, I know you guys have done a fantastic job and done a lot of work, but just being on this side and hearing this presentation from the first time, it's just, you know, if we have to spend almost $1 million to renovate it, I agree with what Council Member Beauregard said. I would rather see us not spend that $1 million on the construction and put a one-story building on that site and cut the cost probably by another $6 million. I still think it's a lot of money, and $268 is a lot of money for an individual taxpayer, especially if you have a new family, or, you know, we're talking about potentially, you know, senior tax exemptions have been floated by previous councils. You know, I hear that with residents in town that are looking for extra benefits. Eventually, that money is going to add up to somebody in town, and it could be a reason why somebody leaves a town. You know, younger families, they don't stay loyal to a town if they can get something of a similar comparison. So I think before we just start throwing money, I think we just need to really make sure it's the best return on investment. And this is a capital project, so we should be thinking like that. And I still think $20 million needs to, I said it when you guys did your presentation last time, at $20 million, what are we doing? It's a lot of money. And I think we can cut some areas, and I think we can get it a little more cost-friendly and a little more digestible for somebody that's voting. So I'm still going to ask what a cost would look like for a single-story building. I just think
You're not gonna save $6 million just by making it a
well,
single.
I'm not an expert in that, but I'm assuming it would knock off significant cost, right?
No. No.
Without costing it out. You're telling me no?
No, it won't-
And
it won't.
downsizing?
Downsizing would save you.
Well, you would have to down.
Square footage is dollars. If you want to save money, you cut square footage. Simple as that.
I would
That's-
assume you
that's
would
true on
downsize
any
if you were cutting a
construction.
floor.
Huh?
I would assume you would be downsizing a little bit if you were cutting a floor.
Well, the only thing that automatically comes out without somebody revisiting the statement of needs is the stairs and elevators, excuse me.
So if it was ever proposed to go to a single story,
Now, if you tell me that you want to do a single story with
what
a
would your
small
next steps be
training
if that
room,
was the
or-
direction of the council?
If I was directed to do something smaller, then I would ask what the goal is. Because there's you can cut a lot of things, you can cut a cell out. Now, the department thinks they need this number of cells that are in there. They had a bigger number before, and they came down on that. You can make the training room smaller. You know, it was a much bigger training room. They downsized it. They stopped, I believe, at 40 seats, which is the size that you need to host a training. And then you can get some of your officers trained for free if you're able to host a training. A lot of departments use that number. You can make the chief's office smaller. You're not going to save a ton by doing that. You can make the captain's office smaller, again, a little bit here, a little bit there. You can decide that you're not going to plan for the future. You can put 26 lockers in. That would save money. I don't know what happens if you hire the 27th officer.
Isn't there like 44 lockers or
There's 40 in there.
40
between
lockers? So you're
male
like,
and female.
that's significant scaling up of employment. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, you're building a substantial growth inside of the building now, and it still has the capacity to expand, which I'm all for adding extra space to expand, but at what point is it additional space that may never be needed versus space that's actually critically needed? And at
Well,
what
that's-
point do those two intersect to say, no, we don't actually need this space?
That's the beauty. You're not building that space. It's open. It's empty space. It's there so you could add an addition in the future.
I think we see that differently on some of the points, so I'm gonna stop it now.
So I think, what Mr. Vadney said, about we've been doing this for a long time, and I think that's the key right here. So back in 2014, we had a bond that went out, a ballot question for a $5 million renovation back in 2014. Back in 16, we started to, do some of that work and in earnest look at it, and then everything stopped. And to Mr. Beauregard's point, that money that was supposed to be spent on bringing that building up to code back in 2014 and 16 is being used just to keep it alive for another year, a year and a half. So I feel that we disenfranchised voters by not doing what they asked for. They asked for the renovation. We gave them nothing. And that bothers me, so I'm very hypersensitive about having anything that could possibly backfire again. We all know this happened, right?
We put this board together, back in 2016. And it wasn't just thrown together haphazardly. We didn't just have anybody, on it. We specifically looked for people that were highly qualified, and we came up with this board of highly qualified people, and they've been working on this for all these years. They hired a guy that builds police stations, okay? We have these guys who have great construction experience. We have this guy over here that tells us that he's built dozens, if not scores of police stations, right? Hundreds of police stations. And we're going to make a decision after a 1 hour thing saying, nah, your idea is really not that great. After 1 hour, after the months and years that they've been putting in, the couple of years that he's been contracted, we're going to sit here in 1 hour, after an hour, and say, your plan's not very good. We got a great crew over there, and we got a great architect over here. If they say this is the way to go, with my experience, this is the way to go. We need this police station.
If I may, unfortunately, the chief is not here tonight. He's out of state. He would tell you part of the reason that he needs what he needs in the building is the number of calls that they get, the number of arrests that they make, and it goes on and on. And to his credit, as we've looked at the project from early on when it was saying, we think it's too big, scale it back. And he did that. And he went and visited Bellingham, and he went and visited Smithfield, and he went and visited Cumberland. And you know what he gets out of these guys? We wish we would have built it bigger. Cumberland is the newest station, and their chief is already saying, we wish we would have built it bigger. I could use another 2,000 square feet, and they have a 20,000 square foot building. And that's what we don't want to get into. We don't want to build something that's inadequate from day one. We want to make sure that it's properly funded, because the reason that we're sitting here right now dealing with this issue is because in 2016 or 2014, when the voters voted for that amount of money, it was never enough money to do what was said. It was never properly, the funds never matched the scope. It was off by over $3 million at that time when it went out to bid. That's not us. That's what was provided to us from the town when we took over this to give an analysis to the council at the time. That's why last April, we said, okay, let's stop when we were pursuing a bond question at the general election, we said, nope, let's stop. Because escalation was out of control. We couldn't get anything stabilized. Things have stabilized now. Now we have what we believe is a firm number going forward that's gonna hold, because we didn't wanna do that again and say, oh, let's put a question out for 18 million, and it passes, and then we say, oh, we were wrong, we need $20 million, because things were that erratic.
Well, I respectfully disagree with you on that bond question that went out, and it was done, with professional people that came up with a dollar amount that was working then. Escalation costs have, become prohibitive at this point. But I really want to make sure that we have a backup plan if something happens and people decide that it's too costly for them. We can't force people to do it, and if they choose not to, then we have to have a rational backup plan.
And I just want to make a comment. No one is saying or taking away from the presentation or from what the board has done. Everyone's done a great job. I mean, this is a beautiful station. It just may be too expensive for our town. I mean, we're looking at, the board and, there's people in this town that are having a hard time right now. So for us to say, oh, it's just another $268, don't worry about it, you'll be okay. Some people won't be okay.
Let them decide. Let the people decide. Put it to vote.
Right, but the point is then if it goes and it passes, then what's their option? They have to leave town because now we're pricing people out of town. I mean, and then to compare us to Cumberland, to say Cumberland wish we had another 2,000 square feet, that's not an apples to apples comparison. Cumberland is a lot bigger than us. When I went to Sutton, which is kind of comparable to us, she actually said that there was some rooms that they never used and that they probably didn't really need them. So you can get that on both sides. They can come out and say, yeah, you know what, we don't use this, and oh, I wish it was bigger here, but unless we're comparing the same size town, we're not gonna get the same answers. I mean, Cumberland is not somewhere to compare us to, so.
Cumberland is a rural community, much like ours.
It's rural, but it's a lot bigger.
They have more square footage.
Right.
And so there may be more officers on patrol. Here's one of the things, here's the kind of stuff that, as we went through this process, when we were trying to downsize it, just to give you a quick example. So we're talking to the chief, and we're saying, can we do away with this? And he goes, hey, he says, I think we can cut this space back. So then we ask him the question, okay, when you have your detective, do you think that your 4 detectives want to be sharing one desk? Or does that guy want his paperwork on his desk, so when he comes back the next day it's there? Or does he want to have to go looking through the drawer to find it? Now the chief is going, okay, that makes sense, why I have 3 desks in the detective's room. Because there are 3 detectives or 4 detectives, and they each should have their own desk so that it's not everyone sharing the same thing. It's what's best practice.
Right.
And so those are the kind of things as we went through, because we pushed them saying, do you really need this? Do you need a 1,000 square foot fitness center? No, we cut it down to 500. And he said, we think we can work with that. We went through this process, and we really pushed them and said, you really need this? And what is this? And what is it? And it comes back to being best practice.
I just have one more question. So you're saying it's a $16, $17 million building, construction cost, all in cost, you're looking at about 20, 21 million, depending on where you go. Has there been any looking at any grants or anything like that? Do you help us find grants? Do you know of anybody that can help fund those communications equipments and help offset some of that cost? So you're not saying, hey, it's 20 million, we can secure grant funding to help secure. Is there ever private donation that comes into this to help, offset some of those costs so that it isn't just all passed through to the taxpayer?
We're not grant writers.
No, I
However,
wouldn't.
we have absolutely helped contribute material for grant applications. At present, I'm not aware of any bricks and mortar grants that are available out there. We've been watching and hoping for some, because there are a lot of communities like yours that, that are facing the need for, whether it's police or fire, for better emergency services facilities. And unfortunately, we just haven't seen any of them come to fruition yet. There have been periodically technology grants that can help. Communications equipment is one, but sometimes it helps with audiovisual equipment to help with facilitate training. We see them come out periodically. You have to scour the federal websites to find them, but you know, we check periodically and look for any opportunities, and we'd certainly you know, scour again and take a look on your behalf. It's just, unfortunately, you know, there's been lots of public money available for schools in various states. There's been very little public safety over the years, and I've seen departments get, you know, again, grants for equipment and training tools and those sorts of things, but very few opportunities for bricks and mortar. Even when they were talking about shovel-ready projects at a time, well, I had shovel-ready projects and none of them got any money. You know, you absolutely will look, and the community should look, and you know, it doesn't hurt to talk to your state representatives, and you know, sometimes they're able to find some money. I've had a couple communities in my career that actually got some funding support by just talking to their representatives.
Anyone else have any more questions? Anyone want to make a motion to open up to public comment?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please, Joanne.
Mr. Biragad.
No.
Ms. Hamilton.
Yes.
Mr. Ogier.
Yes.
Ms. Alves.
Yes.
I have a couple of questions that, Mike Clifford, 489 Black Lane Road. I have a couple of questions about the presentation. You mentioned that on 2 occasions, the structural engineer that you hired noticed the change between the first visit and the second visit. What were those dates again of those visits?
I would have to check the record. I don't know offhand. The second visit was just, I believe, in November.
And when did he first inspect it? How much?
That would have been back in 2021,
The date of the letter is April 21st, 2021.
April 21st.
2021. That's the date of his letter. This is their structural engineer's
Yes.
letter? Yes. Okay. Did your structural engineer ever say that the building was not salvageable?
He did not say the building was not salvageable.
Did he say it had to be demolished?
You know what, this is very inappropriate. He should not be directly asking the architect questions. He should direct his questions to the council and not be cross-examining the architect.
Okay. I'd like to know who said it was, I mean, okay, Paul, I'll ask you the question. Can I ask the question of him? He did a presentation. You said, somebody said on that side that the trust made a statement to you verbally that the building was not salvageable. Who from the trust made that statement? I did not say that.
Yes, you did.
I'll tell you the exact quote.
Yeah.
It's beyond repair.
Beyond repair.
That was his, that's not salvageable.
Oh,
That was his
what's the
opinion.
difference between
From a-
beyond repair and not
Would you
salvageable?
stop and let me finish? You asked me a
Okay.
question, okay? From his perspective, as a risk assessment person, it was beyond repair. That was his words.
But he is not a structural engineer.
He's a risk assessor. He's
Okay.
a-
So we've hired 4 architects to this point and had various reports done, and none of the architects have ever said this building can't be renovated. They've said other things, like, you know, the 4 levels are hard to contend with and everything, but nobody said that building had to be demolished. And I'm going to go back to, at what point do you think, I mean, I guess since 2021, he noted that repair was bad. But that repair and the parapet work was a problem identified by the MBRTF years ago. I have umpteen million recordings of the meetings where Mr. Perry brought it up repeatedly. We got to do the parapet work. That's one thing. We got to do the parapet work. They were given a motion. The council in 2018 approved a motion for them to come up with $900,000 in repairs to the building, to the police station. That was what was left. Instead of doing that, they issued bid specs for a project in the area of $2.2 and $2.6 million, and never told the council that was sitting at the time, oh, by the way,
we changed the bid specs to be an all-inclusive type thing. So that's why the bids came in over $900,000, because they didn't do what the council directed them to do. They second-guessed the council and substituted their own opinion. Any other board would have been fired for doing that, but they were congratulated for doing that. I think that, okay, so if this building is now structurally unsalvageable, there ought to be some retribution here. And, I'm sitting here fuming tonight thinking, this is worth suing over. This is worth throwing some money on a lawyer and saying, suing them, because they sat there and watched this happen. The councils, the boards, everybody sat there and watched this happen and watched that building purposely decay so that you could threaten the voters and say, well, we have to do this because the building's beyond repair. You didn't do anything since 2018 when you had the money to do these repairs that he's talking about now. Probably would have been less than $1 million then to do that work. And you chose not to seriously attempt to do it. And now we're sitting there making believe that we're all concerned about the safety of the public walking into that building. You should have been concerned about the safety of the public walking into that building in 2018, and you should have done what you were directed to do. So here's what my idea is, because I've had it now. I'm really, seriously, I'm at the point where I do want to sue, because some people have been told, the nonsense about certain people, the town administrator, when he was sitting on the town council, Mrs. O'Hara, didn't even read the bid specs, so they didn't vote on approving those bid specs in 2018. They didn't approve voting on it because they said, oh, we didn't have a chance to read it. But they voted to release those bid specs, which told me they knew what was in those bid specs. Why would you vote to release something, but you wouldn't vote to approve them? If you didn't read them, don't take a vote on either vote. So that's this has been a complicit, nice little arrangement where in 2014, when the bond issue was going for the voters, I said, something's the matter here. These projects are going to be sabotaged. And they both were. The school department is not in Kendall Dean, and we have done nothing to the police station. And if everybody's sitting there watching it decay since 2016, not putting a penny into it, it's intentional. So I'm mad enough now that maybe I'll write out a big fat check and waste it. I don't care anymore. So this is the story here. I don't understand why we keep saying, and I'm glad you did clarify the language, that it was a renovation and addition. Because people like Mr. Beauregard, you constantly say, Mr. Vadney particularly, the renovation is going to cost the same as the other.
Can we just keep it on point and not?
Okay, but what people are saying is that this is, this renovation, that's not a renovation. It's, as he said, a renovation and addition. It's apples to oranges. What the motion was from the council at the time was, get a price on renovating the current police station. And I think the adage, adding the language of to current standards might have been a misrepresentation of what people wanted. I thought at that point in time, we were looking at going back to the 2014 designs, which we spent $220,000 to develop, and we haven't spent that money on this yet, and asking, okay, how much now, if we go out to bid again on these projects, what will this cost us? If we do what we were going to do in 2014, what the voters approved, how much is it going to cost us? And my guess would have been a couple of years ago, maybe $5 million. It was 3.2 was the lowest bid on that renovation, and it was a full renovation. And John, you need to see and look at the renovation plans. The chief was on board with it. Everybody says, oh, the chief is on board with the new one. Well, the chief was on board with the renovations in 2014. So how about I guess my last question about the presentation you did was, if these renovations are made that you cited tonight, is that going to be, and I think you said at one point too that, this will be at least until you decide whether to do a new building or some type of renovation with that existing building. And I guess my question, which tells me he does think it's structurally sound enough to do something with, but when are we going to revisit the 2014 bid specs. And if you want to give the voters an option, don't just give them the police station's running, falling down, bricks over everybody's head, and everybody's going to get killed by going in there and threatening them on a ballot question. Why don't you give them a choice? I've said it multiple times at multiple meetings. And you can come up with a second alternative and a backup plan for $10,000 maybe. Go back to Eric Army, meet with Eric Army, meet with Studio Major, meet with the chief, and have him look at those plans from 2014 and have the cost estimator come up with a number of what it's going to cost to do the 2014. Even if it costs $5 million, you're going to spend $1 million securing it now, and then $1 million to knock it down later and remove all the asbestos, because they're not removing all the asbestos, he told you, the front wall. That's not where there's tons of asbestos in that building, and the asbestos prices on this project thing, I think, and the demolishing of that building are very low. I think you should be aware of that because of Hallowell. So, you know, if you went to Eric Army, took a couple of weeks, set up a meeting with him, have him go over his plans from 2014, ask about having a cost estimation done, how much to do this today, then you can put 2 questions on the ballot as 1 question. Which do you support of the 3 items below? Full renovation for $20 million, restoration of the current police station and renovation for $5 million, or C, neither of the 2, because you have to give the voters a chance to vote against. And that's, I've been told by Ledge Counsel. I read the letter from Bond Counsel that I got. But, you know, the statement is made, Bond Counsel said we can't do that. That's not what Bond Counsel said in the letter. If you look at the letter that Bond Counsel wrote, they said, you have to show me exact language. I don't know what you're talking about. I need to see the specific language. So for David Iglesias to write that letter up is, you know, nothing. To sit with, get a cost estimate on the 2014 renovations that we've already approved before you stole my vote. And that's what happened here, and that's why I think I'm willing to spend a lot of money at this point, because I want my vote. And so if you put both questions on the ballot, you're giving me back my vote. I shouldn't have to do it a second time, but you give me that option. But to deny me that, you stole my vote. I'm not worried about the damn Russians. I'm worried about some people in this very room stealing my vote. So my last question on his presentation was, what you would be doing would not, to structurally sound up that front wall and the other things you're going to do, would in no way hinder renovating the building later, and it wouldn't have to be redone, would it? Or would it be done a different way if we didn't do what you're saying now, and we went in and started renovating the building in full right now, would we still be, would that money have been well spent, or is it
He should be directing his questions to the council.
Well, can you answer that then, John?
I'm not the president.
Well, how can I mean, you said to the presentations, I'm addressing it to the presentations.
Ask me the question.
Okay, if we
If we fix the front wall, is that
fix
gonna,
the
we have
front
to
wall the
redo
way
it?
that he described it and do that work, which I think we should do, because, you know, the building's gonna rot even further, we'll make a lot of more people happy, if we don't do it, and we do face a tragedy, will that work need to be taken out and redone, or is it a large waste of money, or is the whole thing a waste of money, or is just a portion of that money wasted? Or do we just need to do it because we have to secure the building for the next 2 years until we do something?
so would that money be wasted, I guess? Can you just answer that in a short kind of?
We would be stabilizing the structure and that front wall. It might make sense to pull that white off at a future time to repair it, because there's lots of other cracking that's going on, and we don't dare go below that precast band above the windows, because then we'd be looking at a window replacement and the scope would go out of control. So there in all likelihood would be some additional repairs to that front elevation. What our work would do would make sure that it's around to give you the opportunity
Okay.
at some time in the future. The asbestos abatement would not be wasted. Would there be more to do?
Yes, okay. Okay.
The stud wall that goes in there, you know, at the end of the day, that is a temporary shoring. When the front wall is restored and all of the joists are solid, then you tear that wall out and it's gone.
Yeah.
But we'll have a better picture
Okay.
once you get those test results, right, as to how far that decaying has gone, right?
Absolutely, yes.
So if it's only through that first brick, then it's just that front piece, that front
Yeah, the front
layer?
the white of brick, yeah, and, you know, again, what we would do is attach it so that it stayed in place until such time a bigger project was looked at. And, you know, again, I think in all likelihood at that time, you would remove those anchors and peel back that white,
Right.
replace the windows,
That's what I want to clarify.
reset some of the precast. And then you'd have to go around the other sides and make sure you do similar. There wouldn't be, based on the condition today, nothing else would be as bad as that front wall.
Because it all went down inside.
Well,
Pretty
because
much.
we're not seeing the kind of deformation, we're not seeing the indication that header brick has been broken. There are cracks that will have to be addressed. So there will be other masonry repairs required.
Okay.
Just a point of clarification, that's the universal we. Jeff and Rebecca aren't going to take the brick out. The contractor is going to do that work. When it
Right.
goes out as part of his bid package, they're going to pull out the patches and look at it, work
Right,
with
but that's-
Tecton to decide what option they're going to use to stabilize it.
But then that's where we'll see how much decay of the brick, right, once they do those tests.
That's correct, but it's the contractor doing it, not
Oh,
Tecton.
yeah, I know,
Okay.
I'm just saying that.
You won't know that answer until it goes out to bid and you get the results in.
Okay.
My last point is the $268 figure that was thrown out there. Nobody even asked how many years was that bond for, what's the rate of interest he used. But you don't just look at that. You have to look at the full array of financials, okay? You have to look at how much money we're gonna be losing in depreciation of National Grid assets. We, at one time, when I got on the Budget Committee, I think it was less than $55,000, or there were $55 million in tangibles they had on the books. It went all the way up to 130 million because they did so many major projects. It's all going to go down now to that 50 million unless they start doing another project. And that's very unlikely that they're going to be doing something that consequential. So you need to look at, okay, you know, it's going to be down 268, but you're also going to have to raise the taxes just to make up over the next 10 years for the thing. Our town's budget is so screwed up and so poor in comparison to other towns, that the best thing this council could do was to just not borrow. Everybody's foaming at the mouth to run out and borrow money as soon as this one's paid off, maybe even before. And the best thing we could possibly do would be to pay those things off and live debt-free for 5 to 10 years. We pay about $4 million annually in interest and principal on those bonds. Think of what you could do with the $4 million a year payment for capital and capital for all the departments in the whole town. I mean, we spent road repair, everything. 5 years of having no debt but $4 million. You lose half of it when you borrow the money. Half of it's going to interest, for God's sakes, more than half probably. So it makes sense that we try to catch our breath, get the budget levels to where they are for operational expenses, where they should be, staffing, everything. You've got no concept of what your budget costs are going to be for the operation of the Scoutus Hall. You don't have any idea of what, you know, nothing. We don't do any planning financially, which goes back to my gripe about not having that work done in November when it was required by law to be done. So I think, don't use 268. That might sound good to taxpayers now, but it's as false as it can be. And if you looked online, I think the Budget Committee's presentation for the bond that was proposed in 2014 is on there. And we looked at we looked at the revenue flow for a 10-year period. We looked at the depreciation loss on all the tangible asset properties in town for a 10-year period. And then we came up with what the tax rate is going to be. And it was for a 10-year bond. I don't know what this is for, but we did a 10-year bond because it was the smarter thing to do.
Thank you.
Do we know, is it a 30-year bond? 20?
Jeff Porter, 6 Country Way, your persistent resident architect. I have 2 items, one architectural. I know we are looking at Scouters Hall. We've looked at this building to house the municipal court. I know that was a discussion. I was listening on YouTube. I might have missed if there was a cost per square foot and how much square footage the municipal court is. But if that's a way to cut some costs and save some square footage, I might recommend that we look at, with the renovations to Scouters Hall and the potential for a community center down at Hallowell, that there could be a community court held at either of those locations or at this location. So that's my one architectural idea, just hearing the presentation on YouTube. My other concern is retainage of employees. No one's talking about the cost of how much it is to train an officer, how much it is to keep them on, and build that community relationship. One of the things that I've really seen a lot in the past 3 or 4 years, a lot of the relationship with the police and the town. If we can't retain officers, we can't build that community relationship. We can't build the trust with the police force. We can't have those interactions, which I think we really want to encourage. Like one of your police stations was saying that they're more open and inviting to the public. So I would also, there's been a lot of talk about money tonight, about a building, but not for the cost of employees, for the cost of public trust, for dealing with officers on a daily basis. I think that should be taken into consideration too. If we renovate a building that is, in my opinion, not salvageable because it's a school. I've walked that building. I hit my head on the pipes in the basement. That's not per code. That is not safe. That's where the cells are. That's where you could have a lot of liability. So I will put my license on the line and say that that building is not salvageable, just based on the tours that I've been in that building, understanding the code implications that need to be done and everything else that needs to go along with it. How can we ask our police officers to stay in a building that's not safe? My wife and I, pre-COVID, we did the I can't remember what it was, but the officer training. Citizens Police Academy, thank you. Yes, the Citizens Academy. The best 8 weeks of our life. We had an amazing time and we learned so much about the officers that are on staff. It was our date night because my son was 3 or 4 at the time, so my mother-in-law would come and we get to know the officers. We built that relationship. I have some of the detectives' numbers in my cell phone, and I feel comfortable reaching out to them. So, they have a building, but how effectively can they do their job? We all go to different buildings types to do our jobs. I work in an office building. I would not want to work in the Bushy School just because of all of the items I saw falling apart when we did our initial walkthrough. What was that, 2020, when the chief had the walkthrough? So that's my biggest concern, is the retainage of the officers and the trust and the relationships that those officers build with the community. And if we can't give them a space to do their job properly, what's to keep them from sticking around? They're going to come here, get trained. Okay, Cumberland has a new police station, I hear, so I'm going to go down the road to Cumberland. And, I don't have to worry about ceiling tiles falling on my head. That was one story that one of the detectives told me, that they had acoustical ceiling tile like that come and fall on their head while they were typing up a report when I toured that building. So, I would encourage that, if we are looking to cut space, look to Scouters, look to the town hall here, look to potentially Hallowell for a municipal court. I know those are things that are coming up. We have this space immediately. We have Scouters coming soon. Hallowell really may be coming closer, but I would encourage, maybe if we're looking at a square foot analysis of that, and cutting some costs to make it a little bit more digestible, I would recommend doing that.
We did not add any space in that building for the municipal court. The municipal court is using what is the training
Okay, good to know.
We didn't add any other square footage to it. And we did wrestle with, should the municipal court be there? And even the municipal court judge said it should be there.
Sure.
For the matter of records are there, the officers are there, and the space is there now. And because of the issues that they need, this space isn't conducive to it.
Sure.
There's no secure place
Yeah.
for the clerk.
Yep.
There's no recording system in place. You've got to constantly bring all your records, bring them back in. So we did go through that, but there's no space like dedicated, here's a municipal court, and that's all it's for.
Okay,
It's used as the training room, is also used as a municipal court.
sure.
And they're gonna modify how they notify people that gotta come to the municipal court. They may have additional municipal courts, so they have smaller crowds.
Yep. Yeah, I know sometimes when working with some of the libraries that I have in the past, you know, we have large community spaces, so we like to make sure that the lights are basically always on in those instances. So, but that's very good to know. And then lastly, Councilman Ogier had said that we don't want to be maintaining this building in 15 years. North Smithfield has a terrible history of maintaining our buildings. Absolute terrible history. Look at Hallowell, look at Scouters, look at the town barn. We need, as a community as a whole, need to start looking at maintenance budgets for all of our buildings. And it hasn't been done very well. So I know, talking with our previous town planner, he had said some communities typically go out every 5 or 6 years. They have an assessment of all their buildings done. They understand what needs to get done within those years, and then they put out a bond for all the repairs that need to be done. Because I would hate for us to continually dump money into buildings that constantly fall apart. That is not sustainable, it's not efficient, and I think just for your edification, for future councils, for future generations, we need to take better care of our buildings in this community. Otherwise, we're going to continually repeat history and have to take care of buildings that are falling down and Band-Aid them and then go back and have exorbitant costs to rebuild or do something different. And if we don't learn from it now, we need to kind of stop that repeating nature of the history that we've been going through. That's it for me tonight. No Hallowell.
Any further discussion?
Can I ask one question? What's the maintenance cost of a building like this per year? Electrical, equipment, all in, on a per year? Maybe not, it may not be a question to you, I know I'm looking at you. But what's the maintenance cost of a 20,000 square foot? I don't know, how big is it? Yeah, like an operational cost for future budgeting purposes. Is that something you can provide?
I mean, we provided a cost of 59,000.
Yeah, I don't have it.
I
Okay.
believe it was $59,000 for,
Energy analysis, the new construction option was about 52
sorry.
thousand.
Okay.
And if we did the renovation addition option, it was 85,500.
Okay.
It is a more energy efficient.
That is energy cost. That is not, you know, a
Right, it's just
generator.
one piece, yeah.
It's not, you know, routine repairs. you know,
Right,
it's-
yeah, it's just one piece. And then with all the credits and tax tax credits for solar, is there any thought about putting solar on the building to help offset future energy costs even further? I didn't see any panels or anything like that. I know that's a direction that a lot of places, I think the state's even further incentivizing solar on commercial development, or not really, just, I don't know how this gets classified. It's probably municipal, but is there any incentives to put solar on it to help reduce the cost further?
There are credits available for solar. We do a lot of police stations that have solar on the plan for the building. Many of those through municipalities are done through a lease agreement with, you know, one of those companies like an Amoresco or somebody like that. But the code requires us to make sure the capacity is built in on the roofs to carry the solar panels. And we often do police stations where we make it solar ready. In other words, we put pathways and space for the switchgear that goes along with the solar panels themselves, the inverters and that sort of equipment. We've done plenty of projects where we've gone even further, and we've already put the inverters and all that in place, and all that remains to be done is do the deal with with one of those lease companies to put the panels on. We are doing one right now where the town is looking to buy the panels themselves to reach a net zero, which, and in their case, they're gonna offset $116,000 a year in energy costs, much bigger building than you're looking at. But they'd be offsetting, all of that electricity cost by going net zero. One caveat I will say, of the two options that we put up there, the flat roof is probably gonna be a better option because it's gonna give you more roof area that's gonna be viable for solar roof. And then if you wanna hit net zero, you probably would have to do some canopies in addition to what's on the roof. What we find is police stations tend to use a higher rate of electricity than, say, like a residence. You put a couple panels, a few panels up on a house, on a two-story house, and you're pretty much going to offset the load. What we're finding in most cases is you need to combine the roof area with a little bit of canopy structure over the parking lots to get to net zero. But even just doing the roof is going to offset cost.
Thank
you. Even if it doesn't get you to net zero. Just on top of that, we've also had departments that are planning for electric fleets. We've had some departments that are planning ahead for electric fleets. Again, just not putting in equipment at this point, but making sure they have the space and the pathways so that they could put electric chargers in the future. To my knowledge, I only know of one department regionally that uses electric cars now, and I think they only have two. Oh, I take that back. Peabody has a couple too.
Does anybody have any more discussion? Do you want to?
So where are we on the agenda?
I know, we kind of jumped all around. So, I mean, I think personally, I would want to probably speak to bond counsel, try and see what they would suggest, how many years of a bond, what the rating, what the interest rate would be, just to see where we stand. I mean, we.
I got it from FDM. I got it Tuesday.
Okay.
Yesterday.
Okay.
It's 4%.
What's that?
I can send it.
Okay. And then I think I want to get a list of all the bonds that we do have still open, and just so we can kind of see where we stand with them. I personally don't have a list of them. You probably do, but I don't. So I want to. Yeah. Well, we just got it.
That's where I got it.
Yeah.
That's where I got them from. But
So.
I know that those are the two big bonds.
Mhm.
Those are the two bonds that are.
Yeah, so I know I personally want to look at that and see where we stand and what's coming off when.
If I may, I would personally like to see a 3 to 5 year projection that we have, so we'll know what other things other than this we need to deal with. Not only what's coming off the books, but what potentially could be coming on the books. Do we have any idea if there's any new business coming in? Is there another group of houses that are going to be built? All those things that we should be putting into the equation when we're making a decision about this. Thank you.
So did you want to discuss the enabling legislation or Secretary of State or any of that, or do we want?
I on there so we could discuss them, like, do you want to have a special election in May or June? I personally think we need to do that.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, just a point of order. We're still in the public comment. Do we need to shut that?
Oh, yeah.
Because we did make a motion to open it, so we should probably shut it.
Make a motion to close public comment?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Biragad.
I don't think that.
Yes.
Ms. Hamilton.
Yes.
Mr. Ogier.
Yes.
Ms. Alves.
Yes.
I just think that we're at that point that we need to make that decision about having a special election date, middle of May, beginning of June. It gives you enough time to go through the process. Enabling legislation is a resolution that you have to pass. The language is easy to come by. Bond counsel can draw it up for you. David could probably draw it up for you. It's not overly complicated. It's a matter of you passing a resolution and getting it to the General Assembly. At the same time, bond counsel is drafting the same question to be on the ballot with the Secretary of State. They have to it's not endorse it, they have to certify it. They have to certify that question 50 days prior. So you have a lot of time, You have time to do this. It's stuff that it's not rocket science, a lot of it's boilerplate. It's a matter of hitting those times. The General Assembly is in session, so if we talk to the state reps and the senators and say, look, we need this done, you reach out to the governor and say, hey, when it gets passed, sign it, so we have it. You don't need the enabling legislation approved before you pin the ballot question to the Secretary of State. And as long as it's to the right form, the Secretary of State is gonna certify it. But I know it's 50 days prior, as opposed to the general election, it's 90 days, special election is 50 days.
Can I just ask a question? Because in the presentation by the architect, they said 2023 ballot would be November with community outreach from April until October. Would that be enough time for community outreach and education on the significance of this?
Between now and the beginning of June?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's nobody in this attendance tonight. Are we even guaranteed that people would show up? And how often would we run like workshops or training sessions, not training, workshops or educational sessions? Would it be weekly? Would it be with the architect? Would it
We
be
actually.
weekends,
well,
nights?
I shouldn't say we.
Yeah.
You actually have a contract with Tecton that we have money still in the original proposal to do 4 major presentations to the public.
Yeah,
Would those be on weekends, nights, days?
We can do weekends.
More than 4 if it's a shortened timeline?
We do them in the evenings. We're actually working with another community now, and we're doing one a month for them. It doesn't have to be that far apart, but we're doing one a month for them, and we actually are purposely scheduling them at different times on different days to help people that have different schedules.
Like
have the
weekends?
opportunity to attend one.
And just to add to that point, that schedule did assume in November funding. If we were to modify that to an earlier funding, that would have a direct cost effect on that escalation.
I'm assuming everything just moves up. Timeline?
Actually, it
No,
moves down.
we do it earlier, so. the
That's why I
cost
mean
goes
it,
down.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, that's what I meant.
But it's a 6-figure number, so it's a substantial reduction.
Gotcha.
Well, I'm not ready to vote unless I get the financials. I can't in good conscience do it. Maybe they'll all come out fabulously and we'll just be great and we'll have wonderful opportunities. I agree with everything everybody said tonight, that I think, we have to be careful that we're not putting anyone in jeopardy. We have to be careful of our liability. We have to be careful that we're not being short-sighted, that we're not overspending, all those things. But I need to know personally, because this is something I take very seriously, that I need a 3 to 5 year projection to see what's going on with our town, and then make a decision from there.
Mr. Administrator, do you know when we would be able to receive something like that?
3 to 5 year projection, is that the question? Yeah, that'll have to be worked out with planning. I know of one possible housing development in town. I think we all know where. I'm not gonna mention it. I think we know where it is. That would have an effect, of course, on school as well. Can you hear me or no? No.
You're live?
Yes, we can do that. We can look for a 3-5-year projection of development that'll impact our revenues, our expenditures, of course. There's only one that comes to mind right now that's been talked about for affordable housing in town to rehab a particular mill building. We know what it is. I'm not going to mention. We know, well, Joe Garlic, that type of development. So yeah, we can take a look at that. We'll also work with the school department, ask the superintendent what he is aware of, that type of thing, because we're going to take a look at enrollment, projection figures from RIDEM, those type of things. We can do that.
Yeah, and that's another thing too, the school department has asked for $1 million so far, without factoring in state aid. So it could be conceivably less than that, but that's another factor to remember. So we have millions of dollars everywhere, and again, I'm not averse to this. I just think that we have to get everything in order first before we can present it to people, and then educate them, from an honest perspective.
I agree. I think, though, we should make a list exactly of what we're looking for, what we need in order to make a vote. So that way then when something comes up, we're gonna say, I'm really not ready yet. We gotta can you get this? Let's make a list, make our laundry list of what we need in order to make this vote, to make a good, educated decision, and then let's vote yea and nay on it. But instead of just keep kicking the can, and the costs keep going up, let's all agree on what you need. What do you need to make your decision? What do you need? What are we looking for from the town for more information, from the committee, from the architect, and then we vote instead of just keep coming up with new things every time. And I think that'd be the most. I'm not saying that's what you're doing. I'm just saying that's what we should avoid.
Yeah, but I think it's the first time we hear. Like, I didn't know the 268. I had no idea. Did anybody know that it was going to be 268 per, for an average 400,000? So I mean, just those things that I think if we're going out to talk to people, we have to really know what we can't be, I can't say one number and John says another number and, the president says another. We just have to know what we're talking about. And I think it's like, I'm sorry, I think it's just, it's just like anyone in their household, and if anybody is listening or seeing this tonight or wants to watch it again, you have your budget at your house, right? You're gonna buy a car. You do a projection. What else am I going to have? Am I going to get a raise? Am I going to do this? Am I going to do that? Oh, yeah, I can afford that car payment, or I can't, or I have to have a lesser car. So, as you said before, it isn't rocket science, and I agree with that. I think it would be imprudent of us to move forward on something that we are not certain that, of the impact on the taxpayers. That's all I'm saying. And as soon as we do, and then if we want to put it to the people, and so it isn't a laundry list, it's just like, I'm going to retire. Well, I did a 30-year projection to see if I could, have something to eat till I'm 90 years old, right? We got to do that. We've got to project out. We got to make sure that we're not burdening people. Maybe in the short run, we might be able to pull it off, but if something else happens, we should have that at least, and things come up. It won't be a given, but it'll be a guideline for us to be able to make an intelligent decision.
That's fair. Does anybody else have anything that they need in order to make an educated decision? We should.
So, Paul, can you send what you got from bond counsel to everyone so we can?
I didn't get it from bond counsel. I got it from the financial advisors, FTM.
Okay.
Steve Masser.
Okay.
Steve is great. Steve is great.
So could you send that to us anyway?
Bond counsel is just a matter of contacting Ellen Corno, who's bond counsel, and she'll get the language for you. She'll get the language right. David knows how to do resolution. These are some of the things that could have been put in place for language issues, could have been put in place before. They didn't need to be done now. They don't go bad. Language doesn't go bad. You can always put in, if the number changes, you can put a different number in there, but the language doesn't go bad. A lot of this stuff we should have added before that. So you're concerned about informing the people. I've done this too many times. The beauty of it is, the team that you have put in place of this, these people, those people, we're gonna be the ones with those public forums.
My only concern is what happens if nobody shows up to a public forum. I mean, look at tonight, the one in November of 21 or something, when you guys first did your presentation, there was only a handful of people there. Maybe a handful of people watch online. That's not a lot of time. 3 months goes by like that. I mean, and all of a sudden it's gonna be 2026 and we're gonna be like, holy moly, we have a new building or we renovated or whatever. So what happens? How do we reach people? Is it door knocking? Is it, you host something at Dunkin' Donuts? Like, how do you actually reach people if nobody shows up? And how do they know what they're voting on? I mean, most people, I feel like, I would hope, would want to be educated. But there's going to be some people that could walk into a special election because they think, oh, it's an election today. I usually vote. And then they go, this is the first time I'm seeing this. And they just go, sure. Like, what happens? You don't want that situation because there's negative consequences. So how do you go about reaching people who may not be in attendance? Right.
You could do a mailer if you really wanted to. An EDDM. One card brochure giving you all the factual information on it. We don't need Tecton to do it. We could host for the station.
But I think Rebecca's itching to answer, because we had this discussion.
I'm sure.
Services they provided for the community.
And can you do Zoom?
Yes, so we've done that multiple different ways, to your point, and it's really intended to have maximum outreach. So yes, we can do virtual meetings, so we do a Zoom meeting. Typically, if there is an online, a place where all of that can live online, that allows for convenient access. So if you're not able to attend an actual event, you can see recordings of it, you can see all current materials, drawings, all the content we presented here tonight and previous nights. We also do vary time and place, so days, if you have any current events, so if between now and whenever that potential ballot vote is, we can attend other events with a table with information, answer questions. We have done mailers, specifically to neighbors or larger. We can help create brochures, and those can be placed in local businesses. So I think a few other things to note. Really, we want to meet people where they already are. It's always hard with everyone's busy schedules coming to an event in the evening, even if it's during the week or even if it's on a Saturday. So if we can attend other committee meetings, so if you have, we've done like PTA meetings, we've done other larger community oriented meetings, we can attend those, or at least give a project update. Give when that next presentation is. So it's really a toolbox of options, and then we work with the town and the task force in deciding what works best to have that maximum outreach.
So I think some of the things I would want to see is, getting back to this list that we're creating, to feel comfortable voting, is I would like to see a resolution drafted by David. Put placeholders in there for now. There's nothing, I mean, I couldn't vote on this tonight. I have no idea, other than just voting, like picking words and saying, okay, have David go craft it. So just have him craft the language in the resolution. There's no talk about what a special election cost is. I believe from being on the budget committee, it's around $10,000, but that could change. So we haven't talked about the cost of a special election. We haven't talked about if there's gonna be anything else on the special election ballot. I mean, just to hold a special election for one item, that's a lot. I mean, that's a significant portion of money. What's the turnout look like? So we haven't had those conversations. And then obviously I would like to see the financials around it as well, because I think that's what's really gonna hit people the hardest, is how much is it gonna be out of pocket and how much is this is, and so just seeing some of those forecasts as well.
Did you still want to see the scope of a single-story building?
If it's not off the table, I would like to know what a cost would be.
Just to see what an approximate price range would be. I mean, not obviously going into such detail, but.
Yeah, I mean, that is the question. Do we want to reduce square footage at the same time? And who's gonna make that decision? Am I just gonna wing it?
I'm assuming you're gonna charge a V3 on your invoice if we went down that path, right?
Well, if I go back to the whole programming exercise and do the whole conceptual design, yes. take my best guess at square footage reduction, you know, it's not gonna be validated by the police department or anything, but I could take a
Well, I
shot.
mean, like you said, you've done hundreds and hundreds of police stations, so you're the expert of doing the police stations, so in your, you know, in this size town, what is a police station that works, or not just works, but is, I mean, obviously, I mean, you see what we have now, so whatever works in this town that would still be a modern police station and still do what it needs to do.
He can do it.
Doesn't-
I mean, I work in data
Yeah, you don't have
analytics. You
to-
have all the variables you need. You can probably run an average just like that of how much it would cost
Oh, yeah.
without getting super technical.
I can get you that part easy. You know, again, it's unilaterally making the choices for the community. I can do it. They may not agree with me.
Well, I just think I don't think we should just be so quick to write it off. You know, we've already kind of brushed off the side of a renovation, you know, and then it was a renovation in addition. And I think it's gonna be a question that somebody's gonna say, $20 million, that's a lot of money. And, you know, when you guys first presented $18 million, people still talk about $18 million, and that's a substantial amount of money. And, you know, I think there's people on the council at the time that said $18 million, I can't support that. So I have a hard time coming around $20 million, and I know that a lot of people are gonna ask, why not a single story? When you look at surrounding communities that are bigger and have them, I know that you always want more space, but I think there's the other side to that we've heard. So I think just having it, it's worth going through the exercise. I think we should have already gone through it, but, you know, it's good to know. And I don't have any information up here, so it's hard coming into it, not having the presentation in advance. When I was on the council in 2018, 2020, we had just started the process of going out for Tecton. So there's a lot of missing pieces here that you get up here, and to John's point earlier, like, yeah, some of these discussions are coming out in this hour of just listening to you guys, because it's the first time I'm actually hearing to detail what this is, and I'm hearing what residents are saying in the community and being able to put to one, and actually being able to advocate and speak. It's not discrediting the work you guys have done, but it's just, it's questions that come up and are still coming up, and I think we should just at least explore it. And if we've already gone down the path, we should have a cost.
So here's what I will do. I will go through the program, and I will suggest edits. I'm gonna carefully note what they are and what the compromise is, you know, what the pro cons are. Because again, I'm doing it unilaterally, and I need to be transparent in the choices I'm making. And then when I get the reduced square footage, I'll put a cost to a single story solution that does that. You know, I can say, I can share that number, I can share that information. You know, whether or not the police department buys into that, I don't know.
So, doing with the reduced, square footage, and you said the single story and the double story, it might not be as cheap because the single story still takes up the more roofing and stuff like that. So could you do a price with that reduced, square footage with both, like the one story and the two story? Or is that just?
Yeah, I could do that.
Okay.
What is the reduced square footage we'd be shooting for? What are we aiming for?
Well, he's gonna make his judgment with his expertise and see what we can come down to.
Without the police chief's input.
But we can look at it, and then we can also have a meeting with the chief and see if it's something that he can work with.
We did this.
Can you put your mic on, please?
I think but he even admitted that there's still probably some areas where we could cut. I mean, you did say it to some extent that there is additional square footage, and I think we've seen tonight that there could be some additional areas. And I think that we could cut it. What that square footage looks like, I agree. I think you need to get consultation, but I don't think to say that this is the final number. I think there's another number that we could probably find where it's more cost-effective and conducive to both a new building, if that's the route we go, and giving a modern police station, but still considering the taxpayer.
The way I look at it, yes, I can propose to you some cuts in the square footage. That'll get you a lower number too. It's gonna have an things will change in the future for your police department. Will it go from 26 to 40? Maybe not. But there will be other kinds of investigation that you're going to have to do. There's going to be changes in the way police services delivered. You may find yourself wanting to have social services incorporated. And I guarantee that when I cut this, those options will probably go by the wayside. They would have to be an addition in the future. So, yeah, I mean, and I've worked with communities that make those hard choices. But, you know, I don't want to sit here and tell you that they aren't hard choices to make, because they are. You know, you're weighing today's cost against tomorrow's cost. And, you know, so, yeah, I can do this for you.
And can you share any of the data that you have currently to show why that, or the justification for the expanded space in the future?
Well, I already mentioned several of them. I already told you about the potential for social services being integrated. I just had a police department 2 years ago that stopped the project and added social services and some additional public space to the facility, and, you know, they had a big change because of that. And, you know, I already said that body cameras have been
Mhm.
leading to more, the need for more space to do compiling videos, because, you know, you got, if you're interested in an incident, they've got to go through all of that video and edit out the pertinent video to the incident. You don't just put the entire stream out there. So we've seen workstations associated with that and technology associated with that. You don't do that today. We don't have any provisions in the station for that today, other than the potential for some future space. So again, you know, that's the choice you make. You know, you're making it fit today at the cost of what could happen tomorrow. Now, that's a choice that many communities do make. I'm not saying it's a wrong choice. I just want you to be eyes wide open. You wouldn't want to plan for the future, not knowing that you're making sacrifices that could affect that future.
So I guess another thing I want to know is if we're planning, was it 40 lockers?
There's 40 lockers in there. Some of those the civilians use, but also you balance the discrepancy between, I don't know what the ratio of male-female
Okay.
officers could be in the future. We have seen a trend towards greater percentages of female officers.
But has there ever been staffing forecasts that went into that determination? And I think at one point you projected like 15,000 as an estimate for the town, for population, 40 officers. Does that seem like a reasonable, well, there's 40 lockers.
40 lockers, not 40. I think the projection was for 27 officers.
Okay.
It's currently 26.
Yeah, but you see how not having the info,
But-
it's kind of
but-
hard to delineate.
The lockers and the number of people are,
And as I said, there are other civilian staff in there as well.
Yeah, it's just having that data to be able to see where some of these decisions came from, and you know, I just, it helps to see it, to be able to say, okay, yes, I feel comfortable voting for $20 million to go forward to the bond.
Which is why I said that when I go through that exercise, I'll explain it.
And I hear the chatter that's going on. I think you guys saying what's going on. It's not anything that you guys have done.
No, we're trying to figure out about the report. I think
Oh, it's just, yeah.
I think it's on the town site.
Okay.
If not, I can send it to you.
Yeah, it's hard to find
electronically.
things on the town website, so
But a lot of the stuff that Paul was flipping through
it's already
from that
covered.
original report, like the comparison of the other police stations, and like the projections on staffing and the projections on town, that's in that, that's,
Yeah, I mean, well, I just Googled one before I came, and Coventry was like, what, $3 million or something? It was a single story, and that was like 2020, I think it was built, so, but you right, but I know you didn't probably build it, but you see all these different costs out there of all different sizes, and you even work on, so it's just, I think before we can say, like, this is finally the number, we should be going through this exercise and not poking holes, but just making sure that it is final, concrete, ready to go.
Mr. Chamberlain, you said you already went through this. So do you
Yeah, we
have
did-
that information for a
we-
single story?
We've went through these exercises already, and I think the biggest issue with a one-story building was cost, and where do we put it? We still haven't decided, if we do go to the one-story building, where do we build it? That was an issue then, it's still an issue now.
Well, I think
But
the
you didn't have a
solutions-
cost.
We did.
You did have a cost?
We did go through the cost at that time,
Okay.
and it was relatively close. There were more costs associated with the exterior walls, the additional roof, and there were more costs associated with the two-story design because of the elevators and the stairwells. So we did go through some of this exercise already. I don't mind, re-going through it, but I think we gotta come to the point where we have to decide if the cost is directly driven by the square footage. How much square footage do you think we can save in this building? If we go through an exercise and we come up with a savings of additional 2,000 square feet, I don't think you'll find much more than that. Do you, Jeff?
I don't think it'll be dramatically greater than that. But again, my fear is, I put out a number, and then what's gonna happen is, the police department's gonna look at it and say, no, we can't possibly live with this.
We have to talk to them.
Yeah.
They're not part of this equation that I'm being asked to do, so.
So if you save 2,000 or 3,000, say 3,000 square feet at $800, that's $2.4 million. Is that enough? I don't know what you're trying to save. What number are you trying to get to?
And the flip side to that is, 10 years from now, how do you recreate 2,000 square feet that you cut out of your building? Remember, this building is gonna be there in 40 or 50 years. I don't know what policing is gonna look like in 50 years. It hasn't changed a lot in my 50 years, other than we have more officers. The number of officers that we're projecting out is based on the number of calls, the number of arrests. It's all in this report. And so I get a little frustrated because, and I understand you haven't seen any of this, but why are we sitting here giving you a recommendation if you're gonna say, oh, we need to see it? Why did we spend 6 years, almost 7 years, going over this and going through all of this and building this report and giving you the information to say, well, how'd you get to that? And we tell you that we got to it by using the numbers. And then and I understand, you might wanna look at the cost of building a single-story building. We've looked at that, and we have a price, and it's almost identical to a 2-story building. There's not a big cost savings to it. But where do we put it?
I'm going to respectfully just disagree, because we have the budget committee, and for years, and a lot of times, they get sat in the room in the corner, they don't get consulted, and we should follow their budget, but we never ask. And so I totally understand where you're coming from, but I personally can't, in the good conscience of people electing me to sit here, just take a recommendation without asking some questions. That's all I'm doing, just to make sure.
Have you read the report?
I asked for the report. I don't think I got that copy. So it wasn't in our packet. There's nothing in our packet. I mean, it even says that materials will be available online, I think, at 10 a.m. There's nothing. And you sat on the council, Paul. We wouldn't vote on anything if there was no materials in the packet. So I don't think this is unrealistic to even just say maybe we meet back in 2 weeks with some of these answers showed up. I don't think anybody up here is saying, no, we're not going down the route of a bond, or we're not going down the route of a special election. But before we get to that point, we just need to really make sure that those next steps, we dotted every I and crossed every T from a financial aspect to ensure that, when somebody asks us, is this the best you guys could have done? Then yes, we can look them in the eye and say, yes, we went through all the due diligence and we were fiscally responsible and we looked at everything and this makes sense. And it's not discrediting the work that you guys are doing. I totally understand how much work you guys are putting in. But as you just said, this is the first time I have a chance to even really question and ask. And there's a couple people up here that, that's the situation. So, that's all this really is. It's no different than if you were to go anywhere else. And, at my work, I spend hours working on analysis and people will throw it to the side and say, it's not good enough, come back. I don't take it personally. It's just, it's just the way it is to get to the best product. That's all.
I don't think that there was a question of asking you to make any decision tonight. We're giving you information. What you're doing right now is you're taking all the work that we put and focus into a certain point, and you're going this way. You're taking it completely off track and going completely different from looking, and no disrespect, John, from looking at double wides on a different site to a single-story building that we don't know where we go, reducing the square footage. We're going off in a completely different direction now from the direction that we were given. You can't keep changing the direction of what this committee, the tasks that we're given. You can't keep changing the direction when we get to the point that, okay, you gave us a task, here's what spending and you say, let's go this way. Because that's really taking your money and throwing it away. And taking the time that was spent and the effort and throwing it away. That's what we're going down the road right now. We're at that point, you have to have some faith in these people, in those people. You have to have some faith that we've looked at this stuff. We've answered every question that you put out here. We've looked at a single-story building. It comes in almost the same price because it's based on square footage. All of these numbers are conceptual. It's based on a concept based on the number of per square foot. You will not know the number till you put it out to bid. That's the unfortunate part of this. And so that's where the experts over there come in. They know how to price out escalation. They know what the building should have in it, especially this building. It's not a regular building. It's not a building like a house, so don't compare it to a house. And I understand, there's nobody in this room, believe me, about spending money in this town that has background like I do. And the $20 million, while it looks like a lot of money, compared to what? Compare it to the new high school that East Providence just built for $180 million, or compare it to the new high school that Pawtucket wants to build for $235 million. You built a middle school for $31 million 15 years ago. You couldn't even touch that thing for $120 today. So it's all relative to what it is. Mr. Porter does construction all the time. Ask him if he thinks that $20 million is some number that's out of whack. I don't want to put him on the spot, but I know he's already said something about that. It's not a number that's out of the realm of construction for a building like this.
Paul, but I think, and I agree with you, and I appreciate everything everybody's done, but just put yourself in our place. When you were up here, you would consistently ask questions, pertinent questions, interesting questions, drive down right into the bottom of whatever it is that you wanted to get to. That's your reputation. You would not have taken something for the first time, and there are 2 of us out of 4 here that this is the first time we've had an opportunity to look at it. I mean, and we really haven't. We just have an agenda, and we appreciate what the product that you have both put together. But we've got to do it, right? We've got to do our due diligence, and it isn't casting aspersions on anyone's efforts or the amount of time that they put into it, but it is something that I could not just arbitrarily accept. It doesn't matter who gave me something. I need to know for myself so that I'm feeling like I'm responsible to the people who put me here. And like the counselor said, it's probably not going to take that long. Now that we know where it is, how we can read it, we can certainly make heads or tails. If we have a question, we'll reach out, and I think we'll have a better grasp.
Whole point of this is the democratic process.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? We've been given a task. Respond to the task. We're asking you to put a question out so the voters can decide. We will give them all the information that they need. Just like we're giving you all the information that you need. That's where we're really at right now. One decision has already been made by the council to seek numbers for immediate repairs. That decision's already been made. But to your question, what do we do after that? And what do we do if the bond doesn't pass or whatever? Well, we don't know that until we put it out there, right? And the voters will decide that. And so all those unknowns, we need to get to a point, we need to move something. And we need to let the people decide. We're giving you the information, and I understand your concern. Like you said, I sat there, I used to ask questions too, and then make a decision. And it really comes down to having the will to say, you know what, this is the right thing to do, it answers my question, I think this is the right thing to do, and we're gonna move forward.
Thank you.
But I'm just going to kind of piggyback here, but we would just want to know we're doing the best thing because, like we said tonight, we've already had this voted on once before. So now we're going to put it out there again. And then people are going to be like, why should I even vote? Because it doesn't matter. And I just don't want people to, I want them to know that we did the best we could to vet out the best price, the best building, the best that we could do without putting the town over. And if we want to look at, a few more things, I don't see why that, it's not hindering anything. We still have time. Like you said, we have plenty of time, so. Well, you said we have quite a bit of time, so I don't see what the difference or the harm is by looking at these few things and knowing that we are putting the best thing out there for them to vote on, because it's gonna be their second time voting on this.
So,
Right.
just to be clear, what are we asking our consultants to do for us at this point?
So we discussed looking at maybe and not going into a huge, we're not asking you to do this huge presentation, just something quick that you can kind of come back to us, and then if it is something substantial. Right, exactly. We're not asking for some big drawn out, we just want to see if it's worth looking into this further. So 1 story, reduced square footage, and then or to stay with the 2-story, reduced square footage.
Yeah, and again, I'm going to explain the sacrifices and
Correct.
get to that square footage.
Right. Perfect.
So one last question. So are you also asking us to look at what if it doesn't pass at this point?
It might be good just to have some options, because, what if? We haven't really talked about that at all, because everyone is so convinced, yes, we do need a new police station, but is it gonna pass at this price tag? That's, I think, what everyone is concerned about. And maybe we should have 1 or 2 backups, what if? What are we gonna do?
Yeah, it's a good point.
Just even if it's short-term, until we can drop a few bonds and build up some funds and maybe, I think we do need to have a what if. Maybe 1 or 2. Even if it's just 5 or 6 years down the road, this is what we can do until then, until the voters feel more comfortable doing this is a big ticket item. There's no doubt about it, so I think we should have something.
There's no question it's a big ticket item. Understand though that if we don't know that answer, and we go ahead with these immediate repairs to the building, doesn't solve your problem. If you have an answer, it will change what you do with those immediate repairs. You need an answer to that question. Everything else revolves around that answer to the question. And I understand that it may be a no. I personally don't think it will be a no. I really don't. I really don't. There's a case to be made out there and a good case to be made out there.
But I think,
I don't think you get a no. I fully understand. Believe me.
I think they need options too.
And so there's always that option of a no.
Right.
But you won't know that till you get it. And you can't do anything until you get it, because anything else is a waste of time and effort and money until you know that answer.
Mhm.
You need to find out that answer. That's really what it comes down to. Anything else is a waste of time and effort. To find out, what are we gonna do if it doesn't pass A, B, C, D, E? It will be a waste of effort if it does. You need to know that answer.
But you should be prepared. I think we should be prepared, so that at least we know if it doesn't pass, that we have some sort of idea what we would do. It doesn't have to be set in stone, but I think there should be a direction. You don't think there should be a what if?
I don't, because what if what? If it doesn't pass, then what do we do?
Right,
Right, that's the
that's
question.
what I'm asking you, what do we do?
What you were-
You're right, and so there is no answer because I don't know. I don't know, because you can't go down the road of what ifs, what ifs, what ifs. What if the front of the building fell off tomorrow? What would we do? And I'm just I'm kind of being facetious.
No, I
You know what
understand,
mean?
but that is, that,
And And so what do? Then you have no choice?
I think the point, just like Mr. Porter, we're talking about saving a building, but we're not talking about work conditions for the police officers. You have over 30 people, 27 officers, dispatchers, whatever. They matter. So we're going to just keep telling them, well, you're going to have to live with hitting your head on a pipe. You're going to have to live with possible tiles falling down. I think it's time to think about them. And we have never built a police station in this town. Never. We do think about them, I
Yeah.
think, very highly, very
Oh, I
highly.
do.
I
I wouldn't
do.
want to go to work.
You know, so.
And they're coming to work every
So I guess
day.
my follow-up question would be then, if we're not providing them with another option, if that fails, then we're not thinking about them. We have to provide a plan B of some sort, even however skeletal in nature, you know? Because they can't stay in that building for another 5 years.
No,
You
they
know, that-
can't. And my
in its
concern
current
is
condition.
that if we do go the path that Jeff has for the repairs, and it's not enough to keep the face on the building, what do we do then? I think it's time that we really realize this town needs to build a police station. They went from a town hall to a school building, and we never gave them a police station.
Yeah, can I say something real quick? I think you can say, you know, because I agree, right? Like I said earlier, if it's $1 million to fix it, and, you know, you're gonna build new, should you really, and you're gonna, you know, there's other solutions to build new that have been discussed up here, and, you know, you can temporarily, you know, place people to a safe environment, then, you know, those things should be explored. But I think you can say, I support the police and I support their ability to have a new building or to work in a safe environment, but also at the same time say, is $20 million the right price? Because just hypothetically, even if you supported a $10 million building, they're still getting a modern building, they're still getting new equipment, they're still getting new amenities, you know, those things factor in as well. They're not in a rundown school that's falling apart with asbestos, et cetera. So I think, you know, it's not necessarily a black or white decision. It's, yes, you can still support, but still be, you know, thinking of the taxpayer at the same time. And yeah, I just don't want that to get lost, that's all.
Oh, no, and I've been on
I
the
know,
budget
I know.
committee, and
I know,
I'm-
Terry.
I get it with the
Yeah.
money. I totally get it. But I don't think sitting here, everyone understands the cost of construction. I mean, they just had it in the paper this past week. We're building a 12-bed facility for young females in the state for $11 million. $11 million for 12 beds for young girls. How do you think you're getting a police department for that kind of money with what is needed? This is the cost.
Just one quick thing, some of those things, because I know that there was the $180 million for the school, there's state funding that offsets some of that cost. So, well, yes, we all pay as taxpayers, but it's not up to just a municipality or an individual.
because it is
And maybe there
from-
could be private donation that could help offset some of these costs. I don't know how some of that works, I agree, it's not my area of expertise. But there's just, a sticker price is not necessarily a sticker price. It's like, I can go buy a car for $60,000, I could pay $60,000 in cash, or I could finance the whole thing. You know, there's different dollars are dollars, but they're not all the same, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But
I know we're getting late, and I just have one quick question, if I may. So in the, when you go out to communities and you dovetail on existing opportunities to PTAs and things like that to try to get in some educational, do you find that you get a sense from them as to, like, are people going and going, no, I'm not, or, wow, I'm so glad you, I mean, do you get a sense at those meetings how people are feeling? I mean, they must be vocal, right?
We absolutely get a sense of what the people in the room are feeling.
Right, right.
That isn't always representative
Of what the vote is.
I will be honest, sometimes we go and we get nice pleasant receptions and everybody
Right.
seems very happy, and then we go to the vote and it doesn't pass.
Yeah.
Um, it's hard to get a read of the whole mass when you, even with every effort to go to where people are,
Yeah,
to reach out, you're still only
Just a
touching a small percentage of it.
microcosm, yeah, yeah.
And, at the end of the day, it's all of these discussions weigh in to how they're gonna feel about that vote as well, so.
Right. Thank you.
I just, one last thing though, also, a word of caution though. I'd hate for them to come up with the new design of a single-story building, less square footage, $3 million less, and we look at it, oh yeah, $3 million less, let's go with that one. And then we end up getting ourselves into something that is less money, for sure, but just not adequate for what we really need, and what's not adequate for the future's gonna hold either. So we gotta be careful, it's not to just look at the number, but to look at the big picture as well.
Yeah, and I agree. Like, that's, I think, having the pros and the cons of what you're giving up, and the potential, and maybe the chief can be here and explain his vision for the future if he wants to include social services. If not, I think those would have been valuable conversations to have tonight. And I understand he's traveling and stuff like that. So, but I agree. I think just looking at a number and saying it's $3 million cheaper, that's one piece of it. But if it saves money in the long haul, how do you justify that and explain that to people so that they can see the value add as well? So it's just, again, being more informed and having the data to make those decisions. I'll be here a long time, though. I agree, and that's why I asked about solar and other things on the building, which you brought up about electric fleets and stuff like that, and, I agree 100%, and, when I said it's like a return on investment, it's true. What are the added factors? What's the extra benefits? What are some of those qualitative things that we've kind of been discussing as well? What are those pros and those cons before we just make this decision? So I think it's just helpful having that information. Oh, was it 10? Oh, make a motion. I'll make a motion to extend the meeting for 15 minutes.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So maybe we should just review what we're asking for. It's been a lot of things thrown out there, and I think it would be helpful for Paul to know what kind of information we asked him to get for us and what we expect of the architect and, the MBRTF as well, if there is anything. I would like to see David craft a resolution. I know some of that language is like placeholders, like the dollars and, that, but currently where we're standing, I think that would be helpful. I think having an understanding of the financials, and the projections that we heard, I agree with that as well. What else did we have?
So you're saying 3 to 5 year projection?
I think it would be good to have that. And then,
Be a little more specific on what exactly do you want housing? We can't predict what possible
I would like to know what the 3 to 5 year revenue expense forecast is, and factor in at least one development. Because we're talking about that for schools as well. You know, it even came up tonight, you know, the schools could ask for more.
And any depreciation on
Yeah.
things, just so we factor everything in, so we know.
And I know we have a lot of other building projects coming up, like Allowell, demolishing, et cetera, and I think it could be valuable in other areas as well. And we know that the numbers could change. And then also too, that bond, Paul, did you say that was 4%?
That's what that deal is selling.
Okay. Do we know if there's like a lot of variability in interest rates, right? I know that they move around, but are they pretty steady?
They're fairly stable.
Okay.
2 years ago, it was 3%. And so with all of that increase in
So it's probably gonna be around,
mortgages, municipal bonding is a lot
Okay.
more stable.
thank you.
But I will send you, I had them run 18 and $20 million for 20
Okay.
years.
Okay.
I'll send both files to you.
Thank you.
That'd be perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
And then the list of bonds, we'll get that from our audit report, so we should have that. And then just the information that we'll get from Tecton. I think that's
I think that's it,
everything, right?
yeah.
The resolution that you want from David, make sure that he knows it's for enabling legislation.
Yes, good point, good catch.
Because you pass the resolution and then you send it to the General Assembly.
Yeah.
Paul that knows.
Right.
Okay.
So, once all this information is compiled, do we do another joint meeting, or wait for you guys to digest it? And then have a meeting?
Well, we
Why
can't,
don't,
Yeah, I mean,
probably the best way would be to meet jointly so we can all have a conversation, because we can't talk to each
Yeah.
other. So
yeah.
it'd probably be best to do it in person, if that's all right with you guys.
yeah, that could be the next meeting. You got a time frame?
Next Tuesday?
Next Tuesday.
Did you say next Tuesday?
How about Monday?
How much time do you need?
Monday you're meeting.
Do you want to go into, like,
Calendar
the
looking.
first or second meeting in March? The first or third Monday?
Do you want it to be part of the meeting, or do you want it separate?
Well, they're going to have to answer questions, right? They're going to have to answer some questions, because they're going to have some different pricing.
So the second would be a Thursday, if not you're into that first week of March, which would be like the 6th.
Yeah, he's looking at his
Oh.
calendar. How about we meet on the first and third Monday of the month?
Thought they were looking for one.
Or we can do another night if that works better. Would you rather have a separate meeting than a council night? Or you want to do like a Wednesday night or a Thursday night again?
Whatever you wish.
We have a full agenda.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just can't do a Tuesday.
No, only the third Tuesday. Only the third Tuesday.
How about Thursday, the first Thursday in March?
So what does that make it?
What day?
I can't do the
Thursday the
beginning.
9th?
I can't do the beginning of the month.
Does that work for people?
March 9th?
March 9th? Sure. Does that work for you guys? March 9th? At 6:45 again?
Yeah. So is it March 9th, you said?
Yes.
Okay.
Does that conflict with anybody?
I believe there's a planning board meeting that night, but I would have to check.
We could meet at the police.
Can we get an alternate date, just in case?
How about the
That would be good.
16th?
We could meet at the police station.
Do they meet they don't meet every Thursday, right?
15th? The Ides of March?
March 15th?
Oh, that's my anniversary, I'm never gonna be able to go out.
Oh, now we know, though.
March 14th?
Going once?
We know if the planning is definite?
So maybe we could plan the 9th and then have a backup date?
Right, have a backup now. Have backup, there's an idea. No. Yeah, 14th? You- Can you do the 14th, John?
I can do the 14th, not the
You're gonna
9th.
be-
Oh, I can do the 9th too, so is it the 9th?
I think the 9th's the primary one.
Or the 9th would be the preferable one, and then the 14th is our backup date if the planning board is here.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay.
Or we can do the 13th, because we don't have council meeting that night.
13th?
13th better? Okay, so let's do 13th as a backup.
Yeah.
Okay, 9 or 13. Okay.
You got that, 9th or the 13th?
9th or the 13th as a backup. Good, okay.
Joanne, you got those dates? 13th.
And don't feel obligated to bring like cards or anything. for
Oh,
my
we will.
anniversary or anything.
Oh, we will.
What day?
My
His
anniversary is the 15th.
15th, the Ides
Oh.
of
I'm
March.
just saying, you don't have to bring me anything.
Okay.
He does protest too much.
All right, so are we all set?
Yeah, I did find that report on the town site. It's really hard to get to, so I sent you a copy.
I just saw it, thank you. I'll look it over.
I have to get your
Thank
email
you.
address to send you.
Thank you.
'cause
Yeah, yeah, we're
Wasn't
gonna
as
work on
easy as
that
I thought over
website,
the
yeah.
chatter over here. It would have been easy if I just gave you the report.
See, I told you, it's hard to find some stuff.
Thank you.
All right. So do you want us to close first, or you guys want to close?
Do I have a motion to adjourn? Second? Right,
All
Mark,
right. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Second, so moved.
Second.
Ready to get out of here.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you very much.
Thank